The flames clawed higher into the Atlanta night sky as firefighters battled the apartment blaze. Through the chaos of sirens and shouting, no one heard the faint cry from the third floor, no one except Atlas. The German shepherd's ears pricked forward, muscles tensing beneath his scarred coat. Before anyone could stop him, he bolted past the firefighters' perimeter, disappeared through the smoke-filled doorway. "Atlas, no!" Michael Harrison's voice broke as he lunged forward, restrained by two firefighters. "Sir, you can't go in there!" 3 agonizing minutes passed. The building's facade crumbled. Hope evaporated. Then, movement in the doorway. Atlas emerged, dragging a small, unconscious form by the pajama collar. As paramedics rushed forward, the dog's eyes met Michael's, those same eyes that had once stared at him through pouring rain, begging for help. 3 years earlier. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Michael Harrison's windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the downpour as he navigated the empty roads of suburban Atlanta. His 12-hour shift at Northside Hospital's emergency room had drained him. 38 years old, and he already felt twice that. The dashboard clock read 2:17 a.m., its pale green glow the only light besides the occasional lightning flash that illuminated the rain-slicked asphalt. His mind kept returning to the young soldier they'd lost tonight. Traumatic brain injury from an IED in Afghanistan. The boy couldn't have been more than 22. Michael had seen that vacant look before, back when he'd trained military working dogs, back before he'd walked away from it all. Some nights, like tonight, the past felt closer than it should. He turned onto Roswell Road, the familiar route to his modest ranch house where no one waited for him. 3 years since moving back to Georgia, and the place still didn't feel like home. Maybe nowhere would. His father, William, lived less than 30 miles away, but they hadn't spoken in nearly a decade. Some wounds were too deep for small talk to bridge. Lightning split the sky again, illuminating something huddled at the roadside. Michael might have missed it entirely if not for the flash. He slowed the truck, squinting through the deluge. Probably just a garbage bag, he told himself. But something about the shape made him pull over anyway. He grabbed his flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped into the rain, instantly soaked. 20 feet ahead, the beam caught something dark and hunched. Not garbage, an animal. The German shepherd lay collapsed on its side, ribs showing through its matted coat. As Michael approached, the dog raised its head slightly, revealing eyes that struck him like a physical blow, deep brown pools filled with a terrible awareness. Not just pain or fear, but something worse, something human. "Easy there," Michael said softly, crouching a safe distance away. The dog attempted to stand but collapsed again, a low whine escaping its throat. Its back was covered with what Michael first thought was mud. But as he moved closer, his medical training recognized the truth. Blood, both fresh and old, mixing with rain to create a grotesque watercolor across the animal's flank. What disturbed him most were the scars. Not random injuries, but methodical marks. Deliberate, the kind made by human hands with clear intent. "Who did this to you?" he whispered. The dog's eyes never left his face. Then, defying what seemed physically possible, it dragged itself a few inches toward Michael rather than away. In that moment, the rain seemed to fade away. Michael Harrison, who had walked away from his military career, who had distanced himself from his father, who kept colleagues at arm's length, felt something crack inside his carefully constructed isolation. "I'm going to help you," he promised, shrugging off his jacket to wrap around the trembling animal. "You're not alone anymore." Neither, he realized as he gently lifted the dog into his arms, was he? The midnight blue sign for Peachtree Emergency Veterinary Clinic glowed like a beacon through the downpour. Michael pulled his truck as close to the entrance as possible, the German shepherd cradled against his chest. The dog had stopped struggling entirely. A bad sign. "Hang on, buddy," Michael murmured as he shouldered through the clinic doors, water cascading from his clothes onto the linoleum floor. "Help!" he called out. "I need help here!" A technician rushed forward, eyes widening at the sight of the wounded animal. "Oh my God! Let me get Dr. Sullivan!" Michael stood dripping in the lobby, the dog's labored breathing hot against his neck. He was vaguely aware of other pet owners staring, but his focus remained on the faint, irregular heartbeat he could feel against his chest. "Michael?" The voice stopped him cold. He turned to see Eleanor Sullivan emerging from an exam room, her auburn hair pulled back in a messy bun, green eyes registering shock before shifting to professional concern. "Ellie," he managed. 10 years since Duke University. 10 years since he'd walked away for his first deployment without explanation. Her presence here felt impossible, like worlds colliding that were never meant to meet. "Exam room 3, she said briskly, gesturing to the technician. "Now." Michael followed them into a sterile room where they eased the German shepherd onto a metal table. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, the dog's condition looked even worse. Ribs protruding, coat dull and thin in patches, the network of scars more pronounced. Eleanor worked methodically, inserting an IV catheter while her technician took vital signs. "Temperature 95.8, heart rate 45, and irregular respiratory rate 8, the young woman reported. "He's in shock. Start warm fluids, 40 milliliters per kilo, heating pads. Blood draw for CBC, chem panel, and crossmatch." Eleanor's commands were precise, her hands gentle but efficient as they moved over the dog's body. She glanced up at Michael. "What happened?" "Found him on the side of Roswell Road. No collar, no chip that I could feel. Someone—" Michael's voice hardened. "Someone hurt him. Deliberately." Eleanor nodded grimly, examining a particularly distinct pattern of marks along the dog's flank. "These aren't random injuries." She looked up at him. "You recognize these patterns, don't you?" Michael swallowed hard. The methodical spacing, the uniform depth, he'd seen similar marks during his military days, training techniques that crossed lines he'd refused to cross. "I've seen something like it," he admitted carefully. "I need to sedate him to clean these wounds and take X-rays," Eleanor said. "You should go home, get dry. This will take hours." Michael shook his head. "I'll wait." Eleanor paused, her expression softening momentarily before her professional mask returned. "Suit yourself. Waiting room's through there." 3 cups of vending machine coffee later, Michael sat hunched in an uncomfortable plastic chair, staring at nothing. The rain continued outside, drumming against the windows like persistent fingers. He checked his watch. 4:23 a.m. His shift at the hospital began at noon, but sleep seemed impossible now. He thought about Eleanor, Dr. Sullivan now, and the strange twist of fate that had brought him to her clinic. They'd been close in college, more than close. Then came his recruitment into the K-9 training program, the confidentiality agreements, the sudden deployment. He'd convinced himself a clean break was kinder than the half-truths he'd been authorized to tell. "Michael." He looked up to find Eleanor standing before him, surgical cap in hand, exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath her eyes. "How is he?" Michael asked, standing. "Stable for now. We've got him on fluids, antibiotics, and pain medication. His temperature's coming up slowly." She ran a hand through her hair. "But I won't sugarcoat it. He's in rough shape. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, infected wounds both old and new, and there's evidence of—" She hesitated. "Evidence of what?" "Systematic abuse. Those scars. They're not just from beating. They're calculated, Michael. Methodical. And there's something else." She handed him a tablet showing X-ray images. Look at his fourth and fifth ribs on the left side. Michael studied the image, noticing a healed fracture with something unusual. Is that a microchip, but not a standard pet identification one? It's military grade. The fluorescent lights suddenly seemed too bright, the air too thin. You're sure? I served 3 years with the Army Veterinary Corps before opening this practice. I know what I'm looking at. Eleanor's eyes held his. Whatever this dog was part of, it wasn't good, and someone might be looking for him. Michael's jaw tightened. Let them look. Eleanor studied him for a long moment. There's something else you should see. She led him back to the treatment area where the German Shepherd lay unconscious, connected to monitors and IV lines. His coat had been shaved in patches to treat wounds, revealing more of the systematic scarring. Eleanor gently turned the dog's ear, exposing a small tattoo. SL7, Michael read aloud, his stomach knotting. Mean anything to you? Eleanor asked quietly. Michael shook his head, though something about the designation tugged at his memory. What happens now? Legally, I should report this to animal control. They'd take him to the county shelter once he's stable. She paused. But given the circumstances and the condition he's in, I'll take him, Michael said without hesitation. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. You work 12-hour shifts at the hospital. I'll figure it out. He needs specialized care, Michael. He's severely traumatized, physically and mentally. He may never be a normal pet. I'm not looking for a pet, Michael met her gaze, but I'm not abandoning him to a system that won't understand what he's been through. A ghost of a smile touched Eleanor's lips. Still saving the world, one case at a time? Just trying to balance the scales, he replied quietly. She nodded slowly. I'll need to keep him for at least 72 hours to stabilize him. After that, if you're serious, we'll need to discuss medication, follow-up care, potential behavioral issues. Whatever it takes, Michael said, looking at the sleeping dog. In the quiet beeping of the monitoring equipment, he made a silent promise. Dawn was breaking as Michael finally left the clinic, Eleanor's business card in his pocket with her cell phone number handwritten on the back. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean and glistening. He drove home in a daze, images of the wounded German Shepherd mingling with fragments of his military past. SL7. The designation nagged at him like a half-remembered dream. By the time he pulled into his driveway, a decision had crystallized. He would protect this dog from whatever or whoever had hurt him. 3 days later, Michael returned to the clinic with a new dog bed, collar, leash, and anxiety medication prescription in hand. Eleanor met him in the lobby, her professional demeanor firmly in place. He's doing better physically, she reported as she led him to a quiet room in the back. But I need to prepare you. He's still extremely fearful, especially of men. He may never fully trust humans again. Michael nodded. I understand. Have you thought of a name for him? Eleanor asked, pausing at the door. Michael had, in fact, spent considerable time on this. Atlas, he said finally. Because he's carrying the weight of whatever they did to him, but he's still standing. Eleanor's expression softened momentarily. It suits him. She opened the door slowly. Let's see how he responds to you today. The dog, Atlas, was curled in the corner of a large kennel, his eyes instantly fixing on them as they entered. His body tensed, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Easy approach, Eleanor murmured. No direct eye contact. Let him come to you. Michael knelt slowly, several feet from the kennel, and turned his body slightly away, a non-threatening posture. He sat quietly, waiting. Minutes passed in silence. Then, almost imperceptibly, Atlas's growl subsided. His ears, which had been flattened against his head, moved forward slightly. "Talk to him," Eleanor suggested softly. "Let him get used to your voice." "Hey, Atlas," Michael said quietly. "Remember me from the rain? I'm not going to hurt you." "Nobody's going to hurt you again." The German shepherd's intense gaze never wavered, assessing, calculating. Then, in a movement that made Eleanor inhale sharply, he rose shakily to his feet and took 2 hesitant steps forward within the kennel. "He hasn't approached anyone voluntarily since he's been here," she whispered. Michael continued speaking softly, recounting mundane details about his house, the fenced yard, the quiet neighborhood. Gradually, Atlas moved closer to the kennel door, his nose working as he scented Michael through the bars. "Can I open this?" Michael asked Eleanor. She hesitated. "Let's see if he'll take food from you first." She handed Michael a few small treats, which he offered palm up through the bars. Atlas retreated momentarily, then inched forward again, nostrils flaring. With deliberate caution, he stretched his neck to delicately take a treat from Michael's hand, the barest contact, but contact nonetheless. Eleanor looked stunned. "That's remarkable." By the end of the visit, Atlas had allowed Michael to open the kennel and sit beside him, though any attempt to touch him still triggered immediate withdrawal. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was a beginning. "The paperwork's ready whenever you are," Eleanor said as they prepared to leave. "But Michael," she lowered her voice, "be careful. That microchip. I've been making inquiries through some old Army contacts. There are rumors of a program called Shepherd's Legacy that was shut down for ethics violations. I can't confirm Atlas was part of it, but someone might come looking," Michael finished. Eleanor nodded grimly. "Just watch your back." As Michael drove home with Atlas secured in a travel kennel in the back seat, he couldn't shake the feeling that this rescue was just the beginning of something much larger than he had anticipated. Something that would force him to confront the very past he'd been running from. Atlas whined softly from the back, and Michael glanced in the rearview mirror, meeting those intelligent brown eyes. "We're going home," he said. "Both of us." The first night in Michael's home was a testament to patience. Atlas refused to enter the house willingly, trembling so violently at the threshold that Michael finally carried the German shepherd inside, earning himself a warning growl, but, surprisingly, no bite. Once inside, Atlas retreated to the farthest corner of the living room, wedging himself between a bookshelf and the wall, eyes fixed on Michael's every movement. "This is your home now," Michael said softly, placing a bowl of water nearby before retreating to give the dog space. "No one's going to hurt you here." He slept on the couch that night, unwilling to leave Atlas alone. Around 3 a.m., he awoke to a strange sound, a low, keening whine. In the dim light from the kitchen, he saw Atlas thrashing in his sleep, legs paddling frantically against invisible restraints, teeth bared in silent terror. "Hey, hey, easy," Michael murmured, but didn't approach. He recognized a nightmare when he saw one, knew better than to startle someone or something in the grip of traumatic memories. Atlas jolted awake, disoriented, panicked. His eyes locked onto Michael, but there was no recognition there, only primitive fear. Then, gradually, awareness returned. The dog's breathing slowed. Something in his posture shifted from terror to wariness. Michael recognized that transition intimately. He'd experienced it himself, waking from dreams where he was back in Afghanistan, back in training facilities where some lines were crossed for the sake of operational necessity. "I get them too," he told Atlas quietly. "The nightmares don't own you." The German shepherd watched him for a long time before finally lowering his head to his paws, eyes heavy but refusing to close again. By morning, a silent understanding had formed between them. Two survivors sharing space, respecting boundaries. It wasn't trust yet, but it was a beginning. 3 days into their new arrangement, Michael received a text from Eleanor. "Found something on SL7. Can you come by the clinic tonight? 8 p.m. The message set off alarm bells. Eleanor had been professional but distant during their interactions at the clinic. This sudden urgency suggested something significant. That evening, Michael drove to the clinic after settling Atlas with his dinner. The waiting room was empty, the closed sign already displayed. Eleanor let him in through a side door, her expression tense. "Thanks for coming," she said, leading him to her private office rather than an exam room. "What's going on, Ellie?" he asked, using her old nickname without thinking. She didn't correct him, instead turning her computer monitor so he could see. "I called in a favor from an old colleague at Fort Benning's Veterinary Services. Had him check into that microchip registration number." On screen was a heavily redacted document, but Michael could make out a header. "Project Shepherd's Legacy, Asset Tracking." "SL7, Eleanor said, pointing to a line item. "German Shepherd, male, whelped June 2019. Acquired from Blackwood Military Canine Training Facility." Michael felt his blood go cold. "Blackwood? You know it?" He nodded slowly. "Richard Blackwood, former Army Ranger, moved into specialized canine training after an injury took him out of field operations. I met him a few times during my service." Eleanor studied him. "What kind of man is he?" Michael chose his words carefully. "Brilliant trainer. Unorthodox methods. There were rumors about his facility, that he pushed boundaries on training techniques, especially for military applications." He gestured at the screen. "But this Project Shepherd's Legacy, I never heard of it specifically." "Neither did my contact officially." Eleanor lowered her voice. "But he said there was chatter about a program developing enhanced training protocols that was shut down after an ethics investigation. The dogs from the program were supposed to be evaluated and, if suitable, reassigned to regular military units." "And if not suitable?" Michael asked, already knowing the answer. Eleanor's expression hardened. "Euthanized." The word hung between them like a physical presence. "Atlas escaped," Michael concluded. "That's why he was running in the rain. That's why he's so traumatized. And why someone might be looking for him," Eleanor added grimly. "Military equipment doesn't just walk away without consequences." "He's not equipment," Michael said sharply. Eleanor raised her hands. "I know that, but they might not see it that way." She hesitated. "There's something else. Those scars on his body. I've been analyzing the pattern. They're consistent with certain conditioning techniques." "Behavior modification through negative reinforcement." "Torture," Michael translated flatly. "Essentially." Eleanor pulled up a folder of photos she'd taken during Atlas's treatment. "See these marks here along the flank? They're electrical burns, precise voltage and duration to create pain without permanent tissue damage. And these here," she pointed to another set of scars, "chemical irritants, likely used in conjunction with specific commands or stimuli." Michael felt sick. He'd known military working dog programs employed strict training methods, but what Eleanor was describing went far beyond acceptable practices. "What I don't understand," Eleanor continued, "is why German Shepherds are naturally intelligent, loyal, trainable. This level of force is counterproductive." "Unless they weren't just training him to follow commands," Michael said slowly. "Unless they were trying to override natural instincts. Create responses that wouldn't normally exist." Eleanor's eyes widened slightly. "Like what?" Before Michael could answer, a sharp noise from outside made them both tense. Car doors slamming. Multiple footsteps. "Were you expecting someone?" Michael asked. Eleanor shook her head, moving to peer through the blinds. "Clinic's closed. No appointments." Her breath caught. 2 men, dark clothes, military haircuts. Michael's combat instincts surged to life. "Is there another way out?" She nodded. "Back door through the kennel area. Wipe the computer, meet me at the truck. If I'm not there in 5 minutes, leave without me." He was already moving toward the door. "Michael. Now, Ellie." He slipped through the clinic's darkened treatment area, muscle memory from combat operations guiding his movements. Through the front window, he could see 2 men approaching the main entrance. One tall and lean, the other stockier, both moving with the unmistakable precision of military training. Michael made it to his truck unseen, heart pounding as he waited for Eleanor. 3 minutes later, she emerged from the back door, laptop clutched to her chest. He started the engine as she climbed in. "Drive normally," he instructed as they pulled away from the clinic. "No sudden movements." In the rear-view mirror, he saw the men turn at the sound of the truck, one of them speaking into what looked like a radio. Michael took the first turn, then another, ensuring they weren't followed before accelerating toward the highway. "Who were they?" Eleanor asked, her voice remarkably steady despite the circumstances. "I don't know for certain," Michael replied. "But I think we just confirmed Atlas is more than just a mistreated dog." They drove in tense silence until Michael was confident they weren't being followed. He pulled into a 24-hour diner parking lot, choosing a spot with clear sight lines to all entrances. "I should check on Atlas," he said, pulling out his phone. He'd installed security cameras after bringing Atlas home, a precaution that now seemed prescient rather than paranoid. The live feed showed his living room, Atlas curled in what had become his preferred spot by the bookcase. As they watched, the dog's head suddenly lifted, ears alert. He rose to his feet, moving cautiously toward the front door, body language shifting from relaxed to vigilant. "Someone's there," Michael said, already starting the engine. "Call the police. Tell them there's a break-in at my address." The 15-minute drive to his house was the longest of Michael's life. When they finally turned onto his street, he killed the headlights, coasting the last 100 yards. "Stay in the truck," he told Eleanor, who was already on the phone with emergency dispatch. "They said units are responding, ETA 3 minutes, she reported. Michael's house appeared undisturbed, but Atlas's reaction on the security feed told him otherwise. He approached cautiously, years of military training guiding his movements as he circled to the back door. Through the kitchen window, he could see a figure moving through the darkened house. Michael tested the door. Unlocked, though he distinctly remembered securing it. He eased it open silently, slipping inside. The intruder was in the living room, a pen light sweeping methodically across the floor. Atlas was nowhere in sight. "Police are on the way," Michael called out, keeping his distance, positioning himself near the knife block on the kitchen counter. "I suggest you leave the way you came in." The figure spun around, light briefly illuminating a face that sent a jolt of recognition through Michael. Even after years, he immediately knew those hard features, that military bearing. Richard Blackwood. The pen light lowered slightly. "Harrison? Michael Harrison?" The voice was gruff, incredulous. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I live here," Michael replied evenly. "The better question is, what you're doing breaking into my home." Blackwood straightened, switching tactics with military efficiency. "I'm recovering stolen property. A German Shepherd. Military asset. Designation SL7. "You mean Atlas," Michael said, using the name deliberately. "The dog you tortured and abandoned." "That animal is government property, developed under a classified program," Blackwood insisted. "You're interfering with national security, Harrison." "What I'm interfering with is animal abuse," Michael countered. "What exactly was Project Shepherd's legacy, Blackwood? What were you doing to those dogs?" A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, crossed Blackwood's face before his expression hardened again. "That's classified information. The dog comes with me now." No, he doesn't. Michael heard sirens in the distance, growing closer. But you'll have plenty of time to explain to the police why you broke into my house. Blackwood's posture shifted subtly, the preparatory tension of a man about to attack. Michael braced himself, but before either man could move, a low growl emanated from the hallway. Atlas stood there, hackles raised, teeth bared. Not in fear, but in clear threat. His eyes were fixed on Blackwood with an intensity that made even Michael uneasy. Blackwood's reaction was immediate and unexpected. He took a step back, real fear flashing across his face. "Control your dog, Harrison." "He's not mine to control," Michael said quietly. "And from the look of things, he's not yours either." The standoff held for 3 more tense seconds before Blackwood made his decision. He backed toward the front door just as police lights illuminated the front yard. "This isn't over," he warned. "That dog is dangerous. You have no idea what it's capable of." Michael corrected. "And I think I'm beginning to understand exactly what he's capable of." Blackwood hesitated, then slipped out the side window seconds before officers approached the front door. By the time Michael let them in, Blackwood was gone. But evidence of the break-in remained. After the police had taken statements and departed, promising increased patrols, Michael found Atlas back in his corner, trembling slightly but watchful. "You recognized him," Michael said quietly, keeping his distance. "You know exactly who Richard Blackwood is." Atlas's intelligent eyes held his gaze, and for the first time Michael fully appreciated the depth of awareness in them. This wasn't just a traumatized animal. This was a survivor with memories, with understanding. Eleanor entered cautiously, having waited outside until the police left. "Is he okay?" she asked, her eyes on Atlas. "Physically, yes," Michael replied. "But Blackwood was here, Ellie, looking specifically for him." She paled. "You're sure it was Blackwood?" "Positive. And he confirmed it. Project Shepherd's Legacy, classified program, military asset." Michael ran a hand through his hair. "And Atlas recognized him. You should have seen his reaction. It wasn't just fear. There was intent there." Eleanor approached slowly, kneeling at a respectful distance from Atlas. "What do we do now?" Michael watched as Atlas's gaze shifted between them, alert and assessing. "We protect him. And we find out exactly what Project Shepherd's Legacy was." He paused. "And I think I know where to start." "Where?" Michael took a deep breath. "My father, William Harrison. He worked in military intelligence oversight before he retired. If anyone might have heard whispers about classified programs with ethical concerns, it would be him." "I thought you didn't speak to your father," Eleanor said carefully. "I don't," Michael confirmed. "But for Atlas, I'll make an exception." That night, long after Eleanor had left with promises to research through her military contacts, Michael sat on the floor near Atlas's corner, keeping a respectful distance. "We're in this together now," he told the German shepherd quietly. "Whatever Blackwood did to you, whatever this project was, we'll figure it out." Atlas watched him, those intelligent eyes reflecting the dim lamplight. Then, in a gesture that felt momentous, the dog lowered his head to his paws, eyes still on Michael but tension visibly easing from his body. It wasn't trust, not completely. But it was a beginning. The rain had returned by morning, a gentle but persistent drizzle that transformed Michael's backyard into a glistening green sanctuary. Atlas stood at the sliding glass door, watching the rainfall with an intensity that suggested more than casual interest. After 3 weeks together, small changes had emerged in the German shepherd's behavior. He no longer wedged himself into corners, though he still preferred positions with walls at his back. He accepted food directly from Michael's hand, and last night had briefly, so briefly Michael almost thought he'd imagined it, pressed his head against Michael's knee before withdrawing. "Want to go out?" Michael asked, keeping his voice low and even. He'd learned that sudden sounds or movements could trigger Atlas's defensive responses, sending the dog into a hypervigilant state that sometimes lasted for hours. Atlas's ears twitched at the question. Michael had noticed early on that the dog seemed to understand speech with uncanny precision, not just commands or familiar phrases, but nuanced questions and even complex sentences. Eleanor had mentioned that military working dogs were intensively trained to respond to verbal cues, but Atlas's comprehension exceeded what Michael had seen even in the most highly trained canine units. He slid the door open, stepping back to let Atlas make his own choice. After a moment's hesitation, the German Shepherd stepped out into the rain, not seeking shelter as most dogs would, but standing fully exposed to the gentle downpour, face lifted slightly as water ran through his slowly thickening coat. Michael watched from the doorway, struck by the image. There was something almost ritualistic about it, as if the rain offered Atlas a cleansing he couldn't find elsewhere. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Eleanor, with an update on her research. Since the break-in, they'd been cautious about digital communications, using coded language and avoiding specifics. "I found an interesting article on shepherding techniques," her message read. "Coffee at Miller's to discuss, 2 p.m. Miller's Diner was their designated meeting spot, chosen for its crowded atmosphere and multiple exits. The article meant information on Project Shepherd's legacy. "See you there," he replied, then added, "Bringing our friend for a car ride first." Car rides had become part of Atlas's rehabilitation routine. The first attempt had ended with the dog panicking, clawing at the windows until Michael had quickly returned home. But with patience and incremental exposure, Atlas had gradually acclimated. Now he could ride for 30 minutes without visible distress, though he remained alert, watching the passing landscape with the same intensity he gave to the rain. Before meeting Eleanor, Michael had a more difficult appointment to keep. He'd finally called his father after nearly a decade of silence, the conversation brief and stilted. "Need to talk," Michael had said, after the initial shock of hearing his father's voice had passed. "Professional matter. Military." A long pause had followed. "The lake house," William had finally replied. "Tomorrow, noon." Now, as Michael prepared for the encounter, he found himself more anxious than he'd anticipated. William Harrison had cast a long shadow over Michael's life. Career military intelligence, Vietnam veteran, widowed when Michael was just 12. Their relationship had fractured during Michael's final deployment, when William had warned him about certain military programs that operated in ethical gray areas. "You're being used," his father had said during their last real conversation. "These enhanced training methods you're helping develop, they're not stopping at the line you think they are." Michael had dismissed it as paranoia from an aging intelligence officer. 6 months later, he'd discovered evidence suggesting his father might have been right, but by then, pride and shame had made reconciliation impossible. Atlas seemed to sense his tension, staying unusually close as Michael gathered his keys and jacket. "We're going to meet someone," Michael explained, finding it natural to speak to Atlas as he would to a person. "My father. We haven't talked in a long time, but he might have information about what happened to you." Atlas's ears pricked forward at this, head tilting slightly in what looked remarkably like consideration. The drive to Lake Lanier took 40 minutes, Atlas sitting upright in the passenger seat rather than in the back as most dogs would. The rain had stopped, leaving a misty haze hanging over the water as Michael pulled up to the small cabin his father had purchased after retirement. William Harrison stood on the porch, looking older than Michael remembered, but still possessing the straight-backed military bearing that had defined him. His hair had gone completely gray, his face more deeply lined, but his eyes, the same deep blue as Michael's, remained sharp and assessing. "You came," William said as Michael approached. It wasn't quite a greeting, more an observation. "I said I would." Michael stopped at the foot of the porch steps. "This is Atlas." William's gaze shifted to the German shepherd, who had positioned himself slightly behind Michael, alert but not aggressive. Something flickered across the older man's face. Recognition, not of Atlas specifically, but of what he represented. "SL program," William said quietly. "I can see it in his posture, his eye movement patterns." "Shepherd's legacy?" Michael couldn't hide his surprise. "You know about it?" "I know it existed. I know it was black budget. And I know it was shut down after an internal whistleblower report." William gestured toward the door. "Come inside. We shouldn't talk about this in the open." The cabin's interior was Spartan but comfortable. A military man's retirement retreat. Fishing equipment organized with precision, bookshelves lined with history and military strategy texts, a desk in the corner with a laptop and neat stacks of papers. Atlas entered cautiously, conducting a methodical inspection of the space before settling near Michael, positioned to watch both men and the door. "He's been through a lot," Michael said, noticing his father's observant gaze on the dog. "I found him abandoned in the rain about 3 weeks ago, severely injured, deliberately hurt." William nodded slowly. "Conditioning methods." "I've seen the reports on what they were attempting." He moved to a cabinet, withdrew a bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses. "Drink?" Michael shook his head. "I need clarity for this conversation." A ghost of a smile touched William's lips. Always the responsible one. He poured himself a finger of bourbon, then settled into an armchair. "What do you want to know?" "Everything you can tell me about Project Shepherd's legacy. What it was, what they did to the dogs, and why Richard Blackwood broke into my house trying to reclaim Atlas." William's eyebrows rose. "Blackwood came after you directly. That's concerning." "I'm more concerned about what they did to Atlas," Michael countered. "He's traumatized, Dad. Not just poorly treated, systematically abused in ways that—" he struggled to find the right words. "In ways that changed him." William studied Atlas for a long moment. The program started about 5 years ago. Officially, it was developing advanced training protocols for military working dogs. Unofficially, he took a sip of bourbon. They were pushing boundaries on what dogs could be trained to do. Detection capabilities beyond standard explosive or drug work. Behavioral conditioning that could override natural instincts. "For what purpose?" Michael asked. "Think about what military dogs are used for. Detection, protection, tracking, psychological deterrence. Now imagine those capabilities enhanced to their theoretical limits." William leaned forward. "But the methods they used. Some handlers started reporting concerns, dogs developing severe psychological issues, some becoming dangerously unpredictable. Then a congressional oversight committee got wind of it, started asking questions. And they shut it down." William nodded. "Officially, yes. The dogs were supposed to be evaluated and either reassigned or—" He didn't finish the sentence. "Euthanized," Michael supplied grimly. "Atlas escaped. Blackwood wants him back because he's evidence of what they were doing." "Or because of what Atlas specifically was trained to do," William suggested. "Different dogs in the program were conditioned for different specialized functions." Michael glanced at Atlas, who was watching the conversation with unnerving attention. "How do I find out what they did to him specifically?" William hesitated. "I have some contacts who might know more about the individual assets in the program. But Michael, you need to understand what you're getting into. Blackwood has resources, connections. If he wants this dog badly enough to risk breaking and entering, his name is Atlas." Michael interrupted firmly. William studied his son. You've gotten attached. He trusts me. After everything humans did to him, he's still willing to trust. That means something. A long silence stretched between them, weighted with unspoken history. Finally, William set down his glass. I'll make some calls, see what I can find out about SL7 specifically. But you need to be careful. Keep moving, vary your routines. Blackwood won't have given up. Michael nodded. Thank you. Another pause, then William asked, How long have you been back in Georgia? 3 years? And you're working at Northside Hospital now? Michael was surprised his father knew this detail. Emergency department, yes. William seemed about to say something more, then thought better of it. I'll call you when I have information. As they prepared to leave, William stopped Michael at the door. That last conversation we had before your deployment. He hesitated. I was right to warn you, but wrong in how I did it. The accusatory tone, I regret that. It wasn't quite an apology, but from William Harrison, it was significant. Michael nodded once, acknowledgement rather than acceptance. I'll wait for your call. On the drive to meet Eleanor, Michael found himself unusually reflective. Atlas sat beside him, occasionally glancing at his face as if reading his emotions. That was harder than I expected, Michael admitted aloud. My father and I, we're complicated, but I think he's going to help us. Miller's Diner was bustling with afternoon customers when they arrived. Eleanor had secured a corner booth with sight lines to all exits, a precaution Michael appreciated. She couldn't hide her surprise when Michael walked in with Atlas on a leash. You brought him? She asked as Michael slid into the booth, Atlas settling underneath the table at his feet. After the break-in, I'm not leaving him alone, Michael explained. Don't worry, he's well behaved. Eleanor studied the German shepherd, who returned her gaze calmly. He looks better. The new medication helping with the anxiety? Some, Michael nodded. The nightmares are less frequent. And he's starting to initiate contact occasionally. A waitress approached, eyed Atlas warily, then took their coffee orders. When she was gone, Eleanor leaned forward. I found something, she said quietly, sliding a folder across the table. My contact at Fort Benning came through. It's not much. Most records were either classified or destroyed when the program was terminated. But it's a start. Michael opened the folder to find several pages of heavily redacted documents, along with what appeared to be training protocols. SL7. Eleanor pointed to a partially visible designation. Specialized in advanced threat detection and assessment. They were conditioning him to recognize micro-expressions, physiological indicators of deception or hostile intent. They trained him to read people, Michael translated, recalling Atlas's intense evaluative gaze. Beyond standard training, Eleanor confirmed, using electrical stimuli paired with visual recognition exercises, essentially forcing his brain to create connections that wouldn't naturally exist. Michael felt sick. Torture disguised as training. There's more, Eleanor continued, her voice dropping further. According to my contact, the dogs that showed the highest aptitude were subjected to additional protocols, something called loyalty override conditioning. What does that mean? They were breaking the natural handler-dog bond, creating assets that could be transferred between operators without the usual adjustment period. Dogs that would obey commands regardless of their personal connection to the handler. Michael looked down at Atlas, understanding dawning. That's why he's so conflicted about human contact. They deliberately broke his ability to form normal attachments, then used pain to force compliance. Eleanor nodded grimly, but it didn't fully take with Atlas. According to these notes, SL7 was showing concerning resistance to loyalty override protocols and was scheduled for final evaluation. Euthanasia, Michael translated. He was going to be killed for having too much heart to break. Their coffee arrived, the conversation pausing until the waitress departed. Atlas remained perfectly still beneath the table, but Michael could sense his alertness, his awareness of their discussion. "There's one other thing," Eleanor said, pulling out a newspaper clipping. 3 months ago, a military contractor named James Peterson was found dead in his home outside Fort Benning. Ruled a suicide. But my contact says Peterson was rumored to be the whistleblower who exposed Project Shepherd's legacy to the Congressional Committee. Michael studied the clipping. "You think it was connected?" "I think it's a significant coincidence," Eleanor replied carefully. "And I think it means you need to be very careful. If Blackwood is willing to break into your home in person, who knows what else he might do?" Michael absorbed this, his jaw tightening. "I met with my father today. He's going to look into SL7 specifically through his old intelligence contacts." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "I thought you two weren't speaking." "We weren't," Michael acknowledged, "but this is bigger than our personal issues." She reached across the table, briefly touching his hand. "Be careful, Michael. This isn't just about saving a dog anymore." "It never was just about saving a dog," he replied, glancing down at Atlas. "From the moment I found him in the rain, this was about doing what's right instead of what's easy." As they left the diner, Michael couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. He scanned the parking lot carefully, noting a black SUV with tinted windows parked at the far end. "Take a different route home," he told Eleanor quietly. "And check if you're being followed. You think, just a precaution," he assured her, though his instincts were screaming otherwise. That evening, as dusk settled over his neighborhood, Michael sat on his back porch with Atlas beside him. The German Shepherd had gradually moved closer throughout the evening until their shoulders were nearly touching, the longest sustained proximity Atlas had voluntarily maintained. "We're going to figure this out," Michael promised softly. "Whatever they did to you, however they hurt you, we'll make it right." Atlas turned to look at him, those intelligent eyes seeming to convey understanding beyond what should be possible. Then, in a gesture that made Michael's breath catch, the dog slowly lowered his head until it rested against Michael's leg, not briefly this time, but settling there with deliberate intent. It was trust, hard-won and fragile, but unmistakable. A bridge across the damage humans had inflicted, a choice to connect despite every lesson of pain that should have taught Atlas otherwise. Michael gently placed his hand on the dog's head, feeling the softness of his ears, the solid warmth of his skull. Atlas tensed momentarily, then relaxed, accepting the touch. "They tried to break you," Michael whispered, "but they failed." That night, Michael woke to find Atlas standing alert by his bedroom door, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Outside, the distinctive sound of a car engine idling, then cutting off, broke the silence. Someone had found them. Michael moved silently to the window, careful to stay to one side as he peered through the blinds. A black SUV, similar to the one he'd spotted at the diner, sat at the curb, headlights off. 2 figures emerged, moving with the coordinated precision of military training. "Good boy," Michael whispered to Atlas, whose hackles remained raised, eyes fixed on the bedroom door. "Stay quiet." He reached for his phone, texting Eleanor with one hand. "Visitors, if you don't hear from me in 30 minutes, call Davis County Sheriff." Then he dialed 911, keeping his voice low as he reported a possible break-in at his address. "Officers are responding. ETA 7 minutes, the dispatcher informed him. Too long. Michael assessed his options with the cool efficiency of his military training. His home had 3 exits: front door, back door, and garage. The intruders would likely cover at least 2. He needed to move before they fully secured the perimeter. "Atlas," he whispered, "come." The German Shepherd followed him silently to the closet where Michael retrieved a baseball bat. Not ideal, but better than nothing. His military combat training had prepared him for situations like this, though he'd hoped never to use those skills in civilian life again. A soft scraping sound from the back door confirmed his suspicions. They were picking the lock rather than breaking in, wanting to avoid noise, perhaps hoping to catch him sleeping. Michael moved to the hallway, Atlas at his heel, positioning himself with sight lines to both the back door and the front entrance. The security system's silent alarm had been triggered. He could see the indicator light blinking on the panel. The police were en route, but survival depended on the next few minutes. The back door opened with barely a sound. A figure slipped inside, weapon drawn. Not Blackwood this time, but a younger man with the unmistakable bearing of special forces. He scanned the kitchen methodically, unaware that Michael was observing him from the shadowed hallway. Atlas tensed beside Michael, a growl building in his chest. Michael placed a gentle hand on the dog's shoulder, a silent command to wait. The intruder proceeded through the kitchen toward the living room, where the second man had now entered through the front door. "Bedroom clear?" the first man whispered. "Haven't checked yet," replied the second. "No sign of the dog." Priority is the asset. Blackwood wants it alive if possible. Michael felt a cold anger replace his initial fear. Asset. Not even the dignity of him or the dog, just equipment to be recovered. He waited until both men moved toward the hallway, then deliberately stepped into view, baseball bat held loosely at his side. "Gentlemen," he said calmly, "you're trespassing on private property." Both men raised their weapons. Not standard-issue military, Michael noted, but non-lethal tranquilizer guns. Designed for Atlas, not him. "Mr. Harrison," the older of the two men addressed him, "we're here to recover military property. Stand aside and you won't be harmed." "Atlas isn't property," Michael replied. "And you're breaking multiple laws right now." The younger man's eyes scanned the hallway. "Where's the dog?" As if in answer, Atlas stepped out from the shadows behind Michael, teeth bared, a low growl emanating from deep in his chest. But he didn't advance. He was waiting, Michael realized, for either command or threat. The older intruder slowly reached into his pocket. "I have authorization documents from the Department of Defense," he said, producing an official-looking folder. "This animal is classified as military equipment developed under Project Shepherd's legacy. Its designation is SL7, and it remains government property regardless of how you acquired it." "He," Michael corrected, "not it. And those documents mean nothing without a court order." "You've broken into my home, armed in the middle of the night. That's not how legal recovery of property works." A flicker of uncertainty crossed the man's face. "Blackwood said you'd be difficult. He also said you were former military. You should understand the importance of operational security. This animal was part of a classified program. Its capabilities and training represent sensitive information." In the distance, Michael could hear sirens approaching. The intruders heard them too, exchanging tense glances. "Last chance, Harrison," the older man said. "Step aside, let us take the dog, and this ends peacefully. Fight us on this, and Blackwood will bring the full weight of the system down on you." Michael didn't budge. 7 years with Special Forces taught me to recognize an illegal operation when I see one. No proper chain of command would authorize a midnight break-in without law enforcement involvement. "Blackwood's acting alone, and you know it." The younger man raised his tranquilizer gun, aiming not at Atlas, but at Michael. "We don't have time for this." What happened next occurred so quickly that later Michael would struggle to reconstruct the exact sequence. As the man's finger tightened on the trigger, Atlas launched forward, not in a frontal attack as most dogs would, but in a tactical maneuver that Michael recognized from military K-9 training. He struck from the side, targeting the man's weapon arm with surgical precision, clamping down with just enough force to immobilize without causing severe damage. The tranquilizer dart discharged harmlessly into the wall as the man cried out in surprise more than pain. The older intruder swung his weapon toward Atlas, but Michael was already moving, baseball bat connecting solidly with the man's wrist, sending the gun clattering to the floor. "Call him off!" the younger man gasped as Atlas maintained his hold, eyes locked on the man's face with unnerving intensity. The sirens were close now, maybe half a block away. The older intruder, weighing his options, made a decision. "Stand down," he ordered his partner. "It's blown." Michael kept his distance, bat still raised. "Atlas, hold," he commanded, uncertain if the dog would respond to standard restraint commands after whatever training he'd received. To his relief, Atlas maintained his position without increasing pressure on the man's arm. "You're making a mistake, Harrison," the older intruder said as red and blue lights flashed through the front windows. "This isn't over." "You're right about that," Michael agreed grimly. When sheriff's deputies entered moments later, they found Michael standing calmly in his hallway, baseball bat lowered, Atlas still restraining the younger intruder with the disciplined precision of a trained police K-9. "These men broke into my home armed with these," Michael explained, indicating the tranquilizer guns. "My security system recorded everything." The aftermath unfolded with bureaucratic predictability. Statements were taken, evidence collected. The intruders identified themselves as private security contractors working for Blackwood Military Consulting. They presented documentation claiming authorization to recover military assets, but as the senior deputy pointed out, that's for a judge to sort out, not something you enforce with a midnight break-in. By dawn, Michael sat exhausted at his kitchen table, Atlas lying at his feet, as Deputy Sheriff Caroline Walsh reviewed his statement. "So they were after your dog," she confirmed, glancing down at Atlas with newfound respect after witnessing his disciplined restraint. "That's an unusual risk for two professionals to take." "Atlas isn't just any dog," Michael explained carefully. "He was part of a military working dog program that, let's just say, it crossed some ethical lines. The man behind tonight's break-in, Richard Blackwood, ran that program." Walsh studied him thoughtfully. "You have documentation of ownership?" "Atlas was abandoned, severely injured. I found him, paid for his medical treatment, and have been rehabilitating him. The local animal control has records of me reporting a found dog with no identification tags or microchip." It wasn't entirely accurate. Atlas did have a microchip, but not a standard pet registry one. Walsh made a note. "Given tonight's events, I'd suggest you file for an emergency protective order." "Won't stop determined individuals, but it creates serious legal consequences if they try again." Michael nodded. "I'd appreciate your help with that." After the deputy left, Eleanor arrived, having received Michael's all-clear text. Her face paled as she surveyed the scene. Evidence markers where the tranquilizer dart had hit the wall, the broken back door lock. "Are you okay?" she asked, kneeling to check Atlas first, then looking up at Michael with concern. "We're fine," he assured her, "but things just escalated significantly. They came to your house, Michael, with weapons." She stood, pacing the kitchen. "This isn't just about recovering a dog anymore. What are they so afraid Atlas might reveal?" Michael had been pondering the same question. Whatever conditioning they subjected him to, whatever they trained him to do, it goes beyond standard military applications. They're willing to risk felony charges to get him back. Eleanor's professional demeanor faltered slightly, revealing genuine fear. "You can't stay here. They know where you live, where you work." "I've already called the hospital, requested emergency leave," Michael confirmed. "But you're right. We need somewhere secure." Eleanor hesitated. "I might know a place. My uncle owns a cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains, completely off-grid. No rental records, no digital footprint. Michael considered this. We'd need supplies, medication for Atlas. I can handle that, she assured him. Pack what you need for a week. I'll pick you up in 2 hours, and we'll take my car. After Eleanor left to make arrangements, Michael knelt beside Atlas, who had maintained a vigilant watch throughout the conversation. You protected me, Michael said softly, meeting the dog's intelligent gaze. You could have seriously injured that man, but you showed restraint. Whatever they did to you, they couldn't break your core nature. Atlas maintained eye contact, his expression impossibly perceptive. Then, in a gesture that felt deliberate, he placed his paw on Michael's knee, an unmistakable connection. Later that morning, as they prepared to leave for the mountains, Michael received an unexpected call from his father. I heard about the break-in, William said without preamble. You've stirred up a hornet's nest. How did you— I still have contacts, William interrupted. Listen carefully. I've been making inquiries about SL7 specifically. There's more to this than just unethical training methods. The dog was part of something called the Sentinel Protocol, an advanced threat assessment program. What does that mean exactly? Michael asked, gesturing for Eleanor to pause loading the car. It means, William continued, lowering his voice, that Atlas was being conditioned to detect and respond to specific behavioral indicators of deception, aggression, even psychopathic tendencies. The program was attempting to create canines that could identify human threats before they acted. Michael recalled Atlas's intense focus when evaluating strangers, the way he seemed to study faces with unusual concentration. That's why Blackwood wants him back so desperately. Atlas isn't just evidence of unethical training, he's a success they can't afford to lose. Or a witness they can't afford to have examined by outside experts, William suggested. A dog trained to detect deception would be invaluable in certain interrogation scenarios. The implication hung in the air, dark and troubling. I'm taking Atlas somewhere safe, Michael said after a moment. Somewhere Blackwood won't find us easily. Good, William approved. I'll continue digging. And Michael, he paused. Be careful. Blackwood has powerful connections in military contracting. He won't give up easily. As they drove toward the Blue Ridge Mountains, Atlas sat upright in the back seat, watching the scenery with alert interest. The dog had come so far from the traumatized, dying creature Michael had found in the rain. Though still bearing physical and psychological scars, Atlas had begun to reclaim his true nature, intelligent, loyal, and fundamentally good, despite humans' attempts to weaponize those qualities. We're going to need evidence, Eleanor said, breaking the thoughtful silence. Documentation of what Shepard's legacy was really doing, something concrete enough to take to the authorities. My father's working on that, Michael replied. And I've been thinking, Atlas himself is evidence. A veterinary forensic specialist could document his injuries, correlate them with specific training methodologies. Eleanor nodded slowly. I know someone at the University of Georgia's veterinary school, specialist in animal cruelty cases, consults for criminal prosecutions. If anyone could build a case based on physical evidence, it's Dr. Myers. When we're settled at the cabin, make the contact, Michael agreed. But carefully. No digital trail leading back to our location. The mountain roads grew steeper and narrower as they ascended into the misty Blue Ridge wilderness. After nearly 3 hours of driving, Eleanor turned onto an unmarked gravel road that wound through dense forest for another 2 miles before ending at a rustic but well-maintained cabin nestled against a rocky hillside. My uncle built this place himself, she explained as they unloaded the car. No electricity except what the solar panels provide, water from a natural spring, propane for cooking. Completely self-sufficient. And virtually impossible to find without knowing it's here, Michael observed, appreciating the strategic value of the location. Steep terrain on 3 sides, dense forest providing cover, and a single approach road that would funnel any visitors into a natural bottleneck. Atlas explored the perimeter methodically, scenting the boundaries of this new territory, while Michael and Eleanor brought supplies inside. The cabin was simple but comfortable. A main room with a stone fireplace, small kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a basic bathroom. Large windows offered commanding views of the surrounding forest and the single approach road. "We should be safe here for at least a few days," Eleanor said, arranging Atlas's medication on the kitchen counter. "Long enough to make contact with Dr. Myers and plan our next steps." Michael nodded, though his military instincts were already identifying defensive positions, escape routes, and potential vulnerabilities. If Blackwood's men somehow tracked them here, the isolated location could become a liability rather than an asset. As dusk fell, they settled in front of the fireplace, Atlas lying closer to Michael than ever before, occasionally resting his head on Michael's knee for brief moments. The dog's gradual increase in physical contact seemed deliberate, as though he were systematically recalibrating his own trauma responses. "He trusts you," Eleanor observed softly. "After everything humans did to him, he's chosen to trust again. That's remarkable." Michael gently stroked Atlas's head, the dog leaning into his touch rather than pulling away. "He's teaching me something about resilience," he admitted. "About moving forward without letting the past define you." Eleanor studied him thoughtfully. "Is that what happened with your father? The past defining your relationship?" Michael was silent for a moment, watching the flames dance in the fireplace. "My last deployment," he finally said, "I was working with a specialized canine training unit, developing new methodologies for military working dogs. My father warned me that some of the people involved were crossing ethical lines, using techniques that caused unnecessary suffering." "And you didn't believe him?" "I thought he was being paranoid, stuck in old-school thinking. We were advancing the field, making dogs more effective, saving human lives." Michael's voice hardened with self-recrimination. "6 months later, I witnessed a training session that crossed every line. A dog being essentially tortured to create a specific response pattern. When I objected, I was reminded of the confidentiality agreements I'd signed." Eleanor waited silently for him to continue. "I reported it anyway through proper channels. Nothing happened except I was reassigned, then eventually eased out of the program altogether." That's when I realized my father had been right. There were powerful interests involved who didn't care about ethical boundaries. "So you left the military," Eleanor concluded. Michael nodded. "Retrained as a nurse, focused on emergency medicine, trying to save lives in a straightforward way, without moral compromise. But I never contacted my father, never told him he'd been right. Pride, I guess. Or shame." Atlas lifted his head, looking intently at Michael as if understanding the weight of this confession. The dog's intelligence sometimes seemed to transcend normal canine awareness, as though the training he'd endured had enhanced his natural cognitive abilities even as it traumatized him. "Tomorrow," Michael said, shifting the conversation, "we should start documenting Atlas's condition systematically. Photos, video of his behavior patterns, detailed notes on his injuries and recovery. Build a case that can't be dismissed as mere animal welfare concern." Eleanor nodded agreement. "And I'll try to reach Dr. Myers through a secure channel. If we can get expert testimony about the nature of Atlas's injuries, we can expose what Shepard's legacy was really doing," Michael finished. "Not just unethical training, but systematic torture of animals for military applications." The fire crackled in the growing silence, shadows dancing across the cabin walls. Outside, darkness had fully enveloped the mountains, creating the peculiar sense of isolation that comes from being miles from the nearest neighbor. "We should establish a watch rotation," Michael suggested, military habits reasserting themselves. 4 hours on, 4 off, just in case. Eleanor didn't argue, understanding the precaution wasn't excessive given what they'd already experienced. "I'll take first watch," she offered. "You and Atlas should rest." Later, lying in the cabin's small bedroom with Atlas curled at his feet, Michael found himself reflecting on how quickly his orderly life had been upended. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a solitary emergency room nurse with a predictable routine and few connections. Now he was essentially in hiding, protecting a dog with extraordinary abilities from people willing to break laws to reclaim him. Yet despite the danger, despite the uncertainty, Michael felt more purposeful than he had in years. This wasn't just about saving an abused animal anymore. It was about exposing a program that had crossed fundamental ethical boundaries, about holding accountable those who believed military necessity justified cruelty. It was about redemption, too. Not just for Atlas, but for himself. A chance to confront the very system he'd once been complicit in, to make right what he'd failed to challenge effectively before. As if sensing these thoughts, Atlas raised his head in the darkness, eyes reflecting the faint moonlight filtering through the window. The German shepherd moved up the bed, settling himself alongside Michael, their bodies parallel, a silent gesture of solidarity that needed no interpretation. "We're going to be okay," Michael whispered, placing a gentle hand on the dog's shoulder. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." The courthouse was only a week away, but it might as well have been a lifetime. 3 days at the mountain cabin had established a tentative routine. Michael documented Atlas's behaviors and physical condition each morning, photographing the healing scars, recording the dog's responses to various stimuli, noting both progress and lingering trauma signs. Eleanor had made contact with Dr. Myers at the University of Georgia, arranging a secure meeting for the following week. And William Harrison, true to his word, continued providing information through carefully coded messages to the burner phone Michael had purchased. "District Attorney reviewing evidence on Peterson case." William's latest message read, "Suicide ruling may be overturned. B's connections becoming liability rather than asset." Michael interpreted this as good news. The investigation into whistleblower James Peterson's death was gaining traction, and Blackwood's powerful connections were beginning to distance themselves from him. The illegal break-in at Michael's home had triggered exactly what Blackwood had hoped to avoid: official scrutiny. On the 4th morning, as fog shrouded the surrounding forest in ghostly white, Michael stood on the cabin's small porch, watching Atlas explore the perimeter, a ritual the German shepherd performed at dawn and dusk each day. The dog moved with methodical precision, checking specific points in sequence, occasionally pausing to scent the air or listen intently. "His situational awareness is remarkable," Eleanor observed, joining Michael with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "It's almost like he's conducting a security sweep." "He probably is," Michael replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Military working dogs are trained to secure perimeters, identify anomalies. Atlas is applying that training, but on his own initiative now, not because he's being commanded to do it." Eleanor studied the dog thoughtfully. "Reclaiming his training for his own purposes, on his own terms." "Exactly." They watched in comfortable silence as Atlas completed his circuit, then trotted up the porch steps to sit at Michael's feet, looking up expectantly. "All clear?" Michael asked with a small smile. Atlas made a soft sound in his throat, neither a whine nor a growl, but something uniquely his own, a form of communication he'd developed with Michael. "I'll take that as a yes." Michael nodded, reaching down to gently stroke the dog's head. Atlas leaned into the touch, another milestone in his gradual rehabilitation. The peaceful morning was interrupted by Michael's burner phone vibrating on the porch railing. William again, but this time requesting an immediate call back, something he hadn't done before. Michael excused himself, walking to the far end of the porch for privacy. His father answered on the first ring. "Michael," William's voice was tense. "You need to move." "Now!" Michael instantly shifted to combat alertness. "What's happened?" "One of Blackwood's contractors was picked up by local police last night, drunk driving. Started talking to reduce his charges. Mentioned a retrieval operation targeting a cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains." "How would they know about this place?" Michael asked, already mentally cataloging what they needed to pack. "Unclear, but irrelevant now. You need to be gone within the hour. I'm sending coordinates for a safe location. Former military property, decommissioned, off most databases. I'll meet you there." Michael was already moving back toward Eleanor. "We'll head out immediately." "Michael," his father added, uncharacteristic emotion in his voice, "be careful. Blackwood is desperate. The ethical violations investigation is gaining momentum, and he knows Atlas is his biggest liability." "Understood," Michael replied, ending the call. "We need to leave," he told Eleanor without preamble. "Blackwood's people know about this location." To her credit, Eleanor asked no questions, immediately moving inside to gather their essential belongings. Atlas sensed the sudden tension, his posture shifting to high alert as he stayed close to Michael. Within 20 minutes they had packed the car and erased all obvious signs of their presence from the cabin. Michael performed a final sweep, ensuring they'd left nothing that could provide clues to their next destination. "Where are we going?" Eleanor finally asked as they pulled onto the gravel access road, Michael driving while constantly checking the rearview mirror. "My father's sending coordinates. Former military installation of some kind, decommissioned. He'll meet us there." Michael navigated the winding mountain road with careful speed. "I don't know how they found this place, but—" "I might," Eleanor interrupted, her expression troubled. "My uncle has been trying to reach me for the past 2 days. I called him back last night, told him we were fine, using the cabin. If someone's monitoring his communications—" Michael nodded grimly. "Blackwood has resources. Military contractors often have access to surveillance capabilities that would shock most civilians." He didn't blame Eleanor. Operational security was second nature to him after years of military service, but not to a veterinarian, regardless of her brief Army experience. They had been driving for approximately 20 minutes when Atlas suddenly stiffened in the back seat, ears forward, focused on something ahead. Moments later, Michael spotted it too. A black SUV parked at a turnout where the mountain road briefly widened, positioned to monitor passing traffic. "Blackwood's people," Michael said quietly, slowing their approach. "Don't react, don't make eye contact." Eleanor kept her gaze straight ahead, though her hands tightened in her lap. "Options?" "Limited," Michael admitted. "Can't turn around without alerting them. Can't go off-road in your vehicle. We maintain course, act normal, hope they're just establishing surveillance and not an interception team." As they passed the SUV, Michael caught a glimpse of 2 men inside, one speaking into what appeared to be a radio or phone. In the rearview mirror, he saw the vehicle pull onto the road behind them, maintaining distance but definitely following. "They're tailing us," Eleanor noted, her voice remarkably steady. "Yes," Michael confirmed, "but not closing distance yet. They may be waiting for backup or a better location to make a move." The mountain road descended through a series of switchbacks, offering few opportunities for evasion. Michael drove precisely at the speed limit, neither too fast to suggest panic, nor too slow to indicate awareness of pursuit. "There's a Forest Service road coming up in about 2 miles, Eleanor said, studying the map on her phone. "Unpaved, but maintained for fire crews. Might give us options." Michael nodded. "Good thinking." Atlas remained intensely vigilant, dividing his attention between the road ahead and the vehicle behind them. The German Shepherd's training was evident in his disciplined alertness. No barking or visible agitation, just focused observation. When they reached the Forest Service road, Michael made a split-second decision, executing a sharp turn without signaling. The SUV behind them immediately accelerated. "They're moving to intercept," Michael reported, pushing Eleanor's car faster on the unpaved road. "Hang on!" The sedan bounced over the rough surface, less suited to these conditions than the pursuing SUV. Michael drove with the precision of his military training, maximizing speed while maintaining control. Atlas braced himself in the back seat, completely steady despite the jarring ride. "Another fork ahead," Eleanor called out, still studying her phone's topographic map. "Left goes deeper into National Forest land, right eventually connects back to Highway 76. Left," Michael decided. "We need to break contact, not lead them to a populated area." He took the left fork, the car fishtailing slightly on loose gravel before regaining traction. The SUV followed, now closing distance rapidly. "They're not just following anymore," Eleanor observed tensely. "No," Michael agreed. "They've committed to interception. Hang on." He pushed the car harder, taking calculated risks on the narrow forest road. The SUV stayed with them, its superior off-road capabilities gradually closing the gap. In the back seat, Atlas's attention was fixed on the pursuing vehicle, a low growl now emanating from his throat. "There," Eleanor suddenly pointed to a barely visible track branching off the road. "Fire break. Might be passable." Without hesitation, Michael swung the car onto the narrow track, branches scraping against the windows as they pushed through undergrowth. The path was barely wider than their vehicle, forcing him to slow despite the urgency. "I don't think they saw us turn," Eleanor said, twisting to look back through the trees. "The undergrowth closed behind us." Michael drove another quarter-mile along the rough track before pulling into a small clearing and cutting the engine. "We wait. Listen." For several tense minutes they sat in silence, straining to hear any sound of pursuit. Atlas remained on high alert, ears swiveling to track distant sounds. Finally they heard what they were waiting for, the SUV continuing past their hidden turnoff, engine sound gradually fading into the distance. "They missed it," Eleanor breathed. "What now?" Michael studied the map on her phone. "This fire break seems to continue for about 3 miles before connecting with another Forest Service road. If we can reach that, we can circle back toward Highway 515 instead of 76, avoid their likely search grid." "The car might not make it," Eleanor warned, looking at the rough terrain ahead. "It's not designed for this." "Then we go on foot," Michael decided. "Take only what we absolutely need, abandon the vehicle, 3 miles through forest terrain, challenging but doable." Eleanor hesitated only briefly before nodding agreement. "I'll pack medical supplies for Atlas. We can't risk his medication being left behind." Within 10 minutes, they had transferred essential supplies to 2 backpacks. Michael ensured Atlas's medications were securely packed, along with water, emergency food, the documentation they'd gathered, and basic survival gear from the emergency kit Eleanor kept in her trunk. "Stay close," Michael instructed as they set out along the fire break. "The forest gets dense in places. Atlas will lead. His senses are sharper than ours." As if understanding his role, Atlas moved to the front position, pausing occasionally to scent the air or listen before proceeding. The German Shepherd's military training was evident in his methodical movement, checking for threats while maintaining a sustainable pace. They walked for nearly 2 hours, the forest growing denser as they moved deeper into the wilderness. The fire break became increasingly overgrown, sometimes barely discernible among the thick vegetation. Atlas navigated confidently, selecting the most passable route with uncanny precision. "He's remarkable," Eleanor observed during a brief rest. "The training he received, the positive aspects of it, are so evident in how he operates." Michael nodded, watching Atlas patrol the perimeter of their small clearing. Military working dogs undergo thousands of hours of training. Not all of it is harmful. Most is built around developing their natural abilities and creating a working partnership with handlers. He paused. What Blackwood did with Project Shepherd's Legacy was pervert that process, push it beyond ethical boundaries. For what purpose? Eleanor asked. What could possibly justify that level of cruelty? Creating the perfect detection tool, Michael replied grimly. Dogs already have extraordinary sensory capabilities. Their ability to detect explosives, drugs, even certain diseases is well documented. Shepherd's Legacy was trying to extend that to human behavioral indicators, micro-expressions, physiological changes associated with deception or hostile intent. A living lie detector, Eleanor translated. One that couldn't be fooled by countermeasures that work against machines. Exactly. And Atlas was apparently one of their most promising subjects, hence Blackwood's determination to recover him. They resumed walking, the terrain gradually becoming more manageable as the fire break widened into a proper service road. Michael checked the coordinates his father had sent, confirming they were still moving in the right general direction despite their detour. We're about 5 miles from the safe location, he reported, but we'll need to find transportation. Walking the whole way would take too long and leave us exposed. As if fate were listening, they rounded a bend to discover a small ranger station nestled in a clearing, little more than a cabin with a radio antenna and a Forest Service pickup truck parked outside. Perfect timing, Eleanor breathed, but it's likely staffed. Michael assessed the situation quickly. We need that truck. I can explain the situation, hope they're sympathetic, but we can't guarantee that. Eleanor considered for a moment. Let me handle this, she said finally. I've treated enough rangers' personal pets at the clinic to have built some goodwill. She approached the cabin openly while Michael and Atlas remained partially concealed at the forest's edge. A ranger emerged, middle-aged, weathered face, instantly alert at the unexpected visitor. "Ma'am, are you lost?" he called out, hand resting casually near what Michael assumed was a sidearm. "Not exactly," Eleanor replied with deliberate calm. "My name is Dr. Eleanor Sullivan, veterinarian from Atlanta. My friend and I were hiking with our dog when we encountered some men who seemed to be poaching. They spotted us and gave chase. We had to abandon our vehicle on a fire break about 2 miles back." The ranger frowned, instantly concerned. "Poachers? Did you get a description?" "2 men, black SUV," Eleanor provided. "They had rifles that didn't look like standard hunting equipment." This detail clearly troubled the ranger. "We've had reports of illegal activity in this sector, probably drug-related." He studied Eleanor, then glanced toward the tree line where Michael partially concealed. "Your friend and dog can come out. I'm Ranger Wilson." Michael emerged cautiously, Atlas at his heel. The German Shepherd remained alert but non-threatening, staying close to Michael's side. "That's a military working dog," Wilson observed immediately, recognizing Atlas's bearing and training. "You, with law enforcement?" "Former military," Michael acknowledged. "The dog is a rescue, rehabilitating after abuse." Wilson studied them for a long moment, then seemed to make a decision. "Look, I don't know exactly what you're involved in, but I know trouble when I see it, and I know a trained military K9 when I see one." He pulled out a set of keys. "Take the truck. I'll report it stolen tomorrow morning, not before. That gives you until then." Michael blinked in surprise. "Why would you help us?" Wilson's weathered face softened slightly. "My son served in Afghanistan, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. His unit had a K9 team attached. That dog saved their lives twice, detecting IEDs the equipment missed." He looked at Atlas. "I respect what these animals do, what they sacrifice." He tossed the keys to Michael. "Just don't wreck my truck." "Thank you," Eleanor said with genuine gratitude. "We'll get it back to you somehow." "Don't worry about that." Wilson waved off her concern. "Just take care of that dog. He's got the look of one that's seen too much." Within minutes, they were driving again, Atlas secured in the extended cab of the pickup. The ranger had even provided them with a map showing Forest Service roads that would lead them circuitously to the highway, avoiding the main routes where Blackwood's team might be watching. "Sometimes people surprise you," Eleanor remarked as they navigated the rough road. "In a good way. Balance to all the bad surprises," Michael agreed, checking the coordinates again. "We're about 2 hours from the safe location, assuming no further complications." Atlas had settled in the back seat, seemingly more relaxed now that they were moving purposefully again. The dog's resilience continued to impress Michael. Despite the stress and disruption, Atlas remained focused and responsive, drawing on his training in constructive ways while gradually overcoming the trauma associated with it. As dusk approached, they finally reached the coordinates William had provided. The decommissioned military property turned out to be a former radar station built into the side of a remote mountain during the Cold War and later abandoned when technology advanced. A single access road led to a compound surrounded by chain-link fencing topped with rusted barbed wire. William Harrison's dark blue truck was already parked beside a small guardhouse, the man himself stepping out as they approached. Even from a distance, Michael could see his father was armed, the subtle bulge of a shoulder holster visible beneath his jacket. "You made it," William said as they pulled up, his relief evident despite his reserved demeanor. "Any complications?" "Blackwood's team was waiting on the main road from the cabin," Michael reported, professional and concise. "We evaded, abandoned the vehicle, proceeded on foot. Acquired this transportation from a sympathetic forest ranger." William nodded, falling easily into the familiar pattern of military debriefing. "Good improvisation. Let's get inside before full dark. The facility has generator power and basic amenities, isolated and defensible." As they unloaded their supplies, William approached Atlas with careful respect, maintaining distance as he observed the German shepherd. "SL7, he said quietly. "He's in better condition than I expected given what he's been through." "He's recovering," Michael confirmed, "physically and psychologically, but the scars are still there, inside and out." William led them through a heavy steel door into what had once been the facility's main building. The interior was utilitarian. Concrete floors, fluorescent lighting powered by a humming generator, basic furniture that looked military surplus. But it was clean, secure, and equipped with essentials. "Communications room has been converted to living quarters," William explained, indicating a door to their right. "Kitchen facility still works. Water from a mountain spring, filtered. Perimeter has motion sensors, basic but functional." "How do you know about this place?" Eleanor asked, setting down her backpack. "I helped decommission it in the 90s, William replied. "Some facilities like this were never fully documented in public records." "Useful for situations requiring discretion." Once they had settled their gear in the Spartan but comfortable living quarters, William called them to a room that had once housed radar equipment. Now it contained a table with maps, files, and a laptop running on battery power. "I've been compiling information on Project Shepherd's legacy," he began without preamble. "Official documentation, witness accounts, financial records, building a case against Blackwood and the program's other administrators." Michael studied the materials spread across the table. "How did you get access to this?" "Most of it would be classified." A ghost of a smile touched William's lips. "I still have friends in intelligence oversight. People concerned about black budget programs operating without proper ethical constraints." He indicated a particularly thick file. "This is what I've gathered specifically on SL7 Atlas." Michael opened the file, Eleanor looking over his shoulder. Inside were training records, medical reports, and assessment documents, many bearing classified stamps. The clinical language did nothing to disguise the disturbing reality they described. Subject demonstrates extraordinary aptitude for micro-expression recognition training, Michael read aloud. Response time to deception indicators reduced to 1.2 seconds. Recommendation: advance to Phase 3 conditioning, despite ongoing resistance to handler neutrality protocols. Handler neutrality, William translated grimly. Breaking the natural bond between dog and handler, creating an asset that would work for anyone holding the control protocols. Eleanor's medical training allowed her to interpret other sections of the documentation. These conditioning sessions, they were using electrical stimulation directly on the amygdala and limbic system, forcing neurological responses to specific stimuli. Her voice hardened with professional outrage. This isn't training. It's neurological manipulation through torture. Atlas had settled on a mat in the corner of the room, watching them intently as they discussed his history. The German shepherd's intelligent eyes moved from speaker to speaker, as though following and perhaps even understanding the conversation about his past. The program was officially terminated after a congressional inquiry, William continued, but Blackwood appears to have continued aspects of it privately through his military contracting company. Several dogs, including Atlas, were reported as humanely euthanized due to unsuccessful rehabilitation potential. But Atlas escaped, Michael concluded. William nodded, and became living evidence of what the program was really doing, if he were examined by independent experts, if these training methods were exposed publicly. Blackwood would face criminal charges, Eleanor finished, and his military contracts would evaporate. Exactly, William confirmed. I've arranged for this documentation to be delivered to specific Congressional Oversight Committee members and Justice Department officials tomorrow morning. With or without Atlas as physical evidence, it should be enough to launch a formal investigation. Michael felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. So we just need to keep Atlas safe until then. Once the investigation is official, Blackwood can't risk further illegal actions to recover him. William's expression remained grave. That's the theory. But Blackwood is desperate and cornered now. The next 12 hours are the most dangerous. As if to punctuate his warning, a perimeter alarm suddenly blared through the facility's ancient speaker system. William moved immediately to a security monitor that had been retrofitted to the wall. "Vehicle approaching," he reported tensely. "Multiple occupants, no headlights." Blackwood had found them again. "How could they have found us?" Eleanor asked, her voice taut with tension. William was already moving, retrieving a set of night vision binoculars from a nearby cabinet. "The ranger station. They likely reported finding your abandoned vehicle, described you and the dog. Blackwood's team would be monitoring emergency channels." He peered through the binoculars at the approaching vehicle. Black SUV, 4 occupants minimum, armed. Michael's military instincts took over. Defensive positions. This facility. What are the vulnerabilities? "Main entrance, service door on the east side, roof access hatch," William replied crisply. "All hardened during Cold War construction, but not impenetrable with the right equipment." "Which they likely have," Michael noted grimly. "Options? Stand and defend, or tactical withdrawal through the emergency tunnel." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Tunnel?" "Cold War paranoia had its benefits," William said with a tight smile. "Service tunnel leads to a concealed exit half a mile down the mountain, designed as escape route in case of attack." Michael quickly assessed their situation. "Atlas and Eleanor through the tunnel. You and I delay them, then follow." William nodded agreement. 2 vehicles in the escape tunnel's concealment bay, pre-positioned for emergencies. Eleanor started to protest. "I'm not leaving you." "This isn't a debate," Michael cut her off, though his tone softened. "Atlas trusts you. If something happens to both of us, you're his best chance." She held his gaze for a long moment, then gave a reluctant nod. What about the evidence? William was already gathering the files into a waterproof bag. Take this. The digital copies will still be delivered tomorrow, but having physical evidence strengthens the case. Michael knelt beside Atlas, who was alert but calm, awaiting direction. Go with Eleanor, he instructed, using the command tone that the German Shepherd had been responding to during their training sessions. Protect. Atlas's eyes held his with unmistakable understanding. Then, deliberately, the dog pressed his muzzle briefly against Michael's chest, a gesture of connection that communicated more than words could. The entrance is behind the communications panel in the sleeping quarters, William instructed Eleanor. Red lever releases the false wall. Follow the tunnel straight. Emergency lighting should still function. Vehicles are fueled and maintained. Eleanor shouldered the bag of evidence, then impulsively embraced Michael. 40 minutes, she said firmly. If you're not there by then, I'm coming back for you. We'll be right behind you, Michael promised, though they both recognized it might be a promise he couldn't keep. As Eleanor and Atlas disappeared into the sleeping quarters, William handed Michael a 9mm pistol. Still remember how to use one of these? Like riding a bike, Michael replied, checking the weapon with practiced movements, though I'd hoped never to need those skills again. They positioned themselves with clear sight lines to both the main entrance and the east service door, using the facility's concrete interior walls for cover. Through the security monitors, they watched Blackwood's team approach. Tactical formation, weapons drawn, moving with the discipline of former special forces. Professional, William observed. Private military contractors, not just security guards. Blackwood's not taking chances anymore, Michael agreed. He knows what's at stake. They watched as the team split, 2 men approaching the main entrance while 2 others circled toward the east service door. Standard breach and clear tactics. They'll breach simultaneously, William predicted. Create confusion, divide our attention. Michael nodded agreement. We hold just long enough to convince them we're making a stand here, then break for the tunnel. Delay, but don't engage unless necessary. Copy that, William responded, the familiar military acknowledgement coming naturally even after years of civilian life. The first explosion rocked the main entrance, a shaped breaching charge designed to blow the lock mechanism. Seconds later, a similar blast hit the east service door. Smoke grenades followed, billowing thick white clouds into the facility. Michael and William remained in position, firing carefully aimed shots toward the entrances, not to hit the intruders but to create the impression of determined defenders. Richard Blackwood's voice came through a megaphone. Harrison? This is your final warning. Surrender the asset and all related documentation, and you walk away from this. That dog has a name, Michael shouted back. He's not an asset and he's not your property anymore. You have no idea what you're interfering with, Blackwood responded. That animal was part of a classified military program. This is a matter of national security. William caught Michael's eye, tapping his watch. They'd bought enough time for Eleanor and Atlas to get a good head start through the tunnel. Now they needed to make their own exit. Cover me, William mouthed, then fired a rapid series of shots toward the main entrance before darting across the open space toward the sleeping quarters. Michael provided covering fire, forcing Blackwood's men to keep their heads down. When William signaled ready, Michael made his own run, bullets from the intruders peppering the wall behind him as he dove through the doorway. William was already activating the hidden entrance, the false wall sliding open to reveal a narrow concrete tunnel with dim emergency lighting. They slipped inside, sealing the entrance behind them just as Blackwood's team breached the sleeping quarters. That won't hold them long, William noted as they jogged down the tunnel. They'll find the entrance mechanism. We just need enough of a head start to reach the vehicles, Michael replied, his breath steady despite the pace. They had covered perhaps half the distance when they heard the muffled explosion behind them, Blackwood's team blasting their way through the hidden door rather than searching for the opening mechanism. They're not bothering with subtlety anymore, William observed grimly. The tunnel began to slope downward, the grade increasing until they were descending a steep set of metal stairs. Ahead, Michael could see the tunnel opening into a larger space, the vehicle bay William had mentioned. Eleanor and Atlas were waiting beside two dust-covered but serviceable SUVs, the German Shepherd alert and vigilant. "I was about to come looking for you," Eleanor said, relief evident in her voice. "Blackwood's team breached faster than expected," William explained, moving to the first vehicle. "They'll be right behind us. We need to move." The vehicle bay's heavy steel door was controlled by an ancient hydraulic system. William activated it, the machinery groaning to life after years of disuse. As the door slowly rose, revealing the night sky beyond, Michael urged Eleanor and Atlas into the second SUV. "Follow us," William instructed, climbing into the lead vehicle. "Stay close. The exit road connects to a Forest Service route about 3 miles down the mountain." Michael took the wheel of the second SUV, Atlas and Eleanor securing themselves in the passenger seats. The German Shepherd's posture remained vigilant, ears alert to the sounds of pursuit echoing down the tunnel. Both vehicles accelerated through the bay door as soon as clearance allowed, headlights illuminating a narrow, overgrown road descending steeply down the mountainside. William led, navigating the treacherous path with the confidence of prior knowledge. Michael followed closely, hands tight on the wheel as the vehicle bounced over the rough surface. "They're coming," Eleanor reported, looking back toward the tunnel exit where lights were now visible. 2 vehicles. Michael pressed the accelerator harder, pushing the SUV to its limits on the dangerous mountain road. The descent was harrowing, hairpin turns with sheer drops on one side, darkness concealing potential obstacles until the last moment. William maintained a punishing pace ahead, clearly familiar with the route. Their head start provided some advantage, but Blackwood's team was gaining. Professional drivers in vehicles better suited to off-road conditions. "The Forest Service road should be wider, better maintained," Michael noted, hoping to reassure Eleanor. "If we can reach it, we have a better chance." Atlas remained unnaturally calm in the passenger seat, his focus divided between the road ahead and the pursuit behind. The German Shepherd's training was evident in his disciplined alertness, no signs of panic despite the high-speed chase and erratic vehicle movements. 3 miles felt like 30 as they navigated the treacherous mountain road. Finally, the narrow track opened onto a wider gravel road, the Forest Service route William had mentioned. Their vehicles picked up speed on the improved surface, but so did their pursuers. "Where are we heading?" Eleanor asked, bracing herself as they took a sharp curve. "County Road 319, Michael replied, recalling the route from the maps they'd studied. "It connects to Highway 76. Once we hit public roads with other traffic, Blackwood's options become more limited." As if the universe had been listening, waiting to prove him wrong, headlights suddenly appeared ahead of them, another vehicle on the Forest Service road, blocking their path. William's SUV braked hard, skidding slightly on the gravel. Michael followed suit, bringing their vehicle to a stop a few feet behind. "Trap!" William's voice came through the phone Eleanor had connected to the vehicle's Bluetooth. "They anticipated our escape route." Through the windshield, Michael could see a black Suburban positioned sideways across the road, armed men taking cover behind it. Behind them, the headlights of their pursuers were closing quickly. "Options?" Michael asked tersely. "There's a logging road about 1/4 mile back," William replied. "Branches east. Not ideal terrain, but passable." "Too late to turn back," Michael observed as the headlights behind them grew larger. "They'd catch us during the maneuver." A spotlight suddenly illuminated their vehicles from the roadblock ahead. Richard Blackwood's voice came through a megaphone. "Final warning, Harrison. Surrender the asset and documentation now. No one needs to get hurt." William's voice came through the phone, calm but urgent. "On my signal, hard reverse, then follow my lead. 3, 2, 1, now!" Both SUVs threw up clouds of gravel as they reversed at speed, forcing the pursuing vehicles to brake suddenly or risk collision. In a coordinated maneuver born of military training, William and Michael executed J-turns, reversing direction in the narrow road. Now facing back the way they had come, they accelerated toward their pursuers, playing a game of chicken. At the last moment, William swerved off the main road onto what appeared to be little more than a game trail, the logging road he had mentioned. Michael followed, the SUV bouncing violently as it left the gravel surface for much rougher terrain. "Hang on!" he warned as they crashed through undergrowth, the vehicle's suspension protesting the abuse. Atlas braced himself, showing none of the panic a normal dog would exhibit in such circumstances. Eleanor gripped the dashboard, face tense, but determined. The logging road was barely deserving of the name, a rough track through dense forest, clearly unused for years. Tree branches whipped against the windows, underbrush scraped the vehicle's undercarriage, and the headlights illuminated a path that sometimes seemed to disappear entirely. "How far does this go?" Eleanor asked, voice strained as they bounced over another rough section. "Not sure," Michael admitted. "William's familiar with the area, not me." Behind them, at least one of the pursuing vehicles had managed to follow onto the logging road, headlights visible through the dust and debris their passage had stirred up. They're still coming," Eleanor reported unnecessarily. Michael pushed the SUV harder, trusting William's navigation ahead of them. The logging road began to climb, the gradient increasing until the vehicle was struggling for traction on the loose surface. William's voice came through the phone again. "Road ends at an old loading zone about half-mile ahead. From there we go on foot. Ravine to the east provides cover, leads down to Turner Creek. Follow the creek south to Highway 76. "Copy that," Michael acknowledged, the military response automatic in the high-stress situation. The loading zone appeared suddenly, a small clearing where timber had once been stacked for transport. William's SUV skidded to a stop and Michael pulled up alongside. "Leave the vehicles," William ordered as he emerged, rifle in hand. "Take only what you absolutely need. Move fast, stay low." They abandoned the SUVs, taking only the evidence bag, a small backpack with Atlas's medications, and what weapons they had. The German shepherd stayed close to Michael, alert but disciplined, awaiting direction. "This way." William led them toward the eastern edge of the clearing where a steep ravine dropped away into darkness. "Careful on the descent. It's rough terrain." They had just started down the ravine when the pursuing vehicle burst into the loading zone, headlights sweeping across the trees. Voices called out and flashlight beams began probing the forest edge. "Down, now," Michael urged, helping Eleanor navigate the steep slope as William covered their retreat. Atlas moved with surprising agility on the difficult terrain, finding secure footing where even the humans struggled. The German shepherd's night vision and instincts proved invaluable as they descended into the increasingly dark ravine. A shout from above indicated they'd been spotted. Seconds later, gunfire erupted, bullets splintering tree bark nearby. "They're shooting at us?" Eleanor gasped in disbelief. "Warning shots," William assessed coolly. "They want Atlas alive, but they're getting desperate." The ravine bottom offered better cover, dense vegetation and the darkness of the forest canopy concealing their movements. They could hear Turner Creek ahead, the sound of running water growing louder as they approached. "Creek's high from recent rains," William noted as they reached the waterway. "Follow it downstream. The current will mask our trail." They waded into the cold water, staying close to the bank where the footing was more secure. Atlas entered without hesitation, swimming strongly where the water deepened. The creek was perhaps 20 feet across, running swift but not dangerously so. Above them, flashlight beams probed the ravine, but the dense foliage and the sound of the water covered their movements. They proceeded downstream for nearly half an hour, the cold water numbing their legs but effectively eliminating any trail for tracking dogs or thermal imaging. Eventually, William guided them back to shore where the ravine widened, the slope becoming more gradual. "Highway should be about a mile east," he said, voice low. We'll cut through the forest here. Approach cautiously." As they regrouped on the shore, Michael checked Atlas for signs of distress. The German Shepherd was wet, but showed no indication of fatigue or hypothermia, his military training and physical conditioning evident in his resilience. "He's remarkable," Eleanor observed, watching Atlas shake himself, then immediately resume his alert posture. "Most dogs would be panicking or exhausted by now." "Military working dogs are selected and trained for extraordinary resilience," William noted with professional respect. Even without the specialized conditioning Blackwood subjected him to. They moved through the forest with as much stealth as possible, though their wet clothing and exhaustion made true silence impossible. William led, his movements revealing his military background despite his age. Michael took rear guard with Eleanor and Atlas between them. The distant sound of vehicles gradually became audible. Highway 76, their temporary salvation. But as they approached the forest edge, William signaled for a halt, dropping to a crouch. The others followed suit. "Roadblock," William whispered, pointing through the trees where flashing lights were visible on the highway. "Police or state patrol, likely monitoring for us." "Blackwood couldn't have authorized an official roadblock," Michael objected. "Not for this. He has connections," William reminded him. "Could have reported a dangerous fugitive, weapons violations, anything to get official resources looking for us." Eleanor checked her phone. "It's 5:40 a.m. The evidence was supposed to be delivered to the Congressional Committee at 9 o'clock. We just need to avoid capture for a few more hours." "Easier said than done," William replied grimly. "We're exhausted, wet, and on foot in unfamiliar territory. Blackwood has vehicles, manpower, and apparently some level of official support." Michael studied the roadblock through the trees, assessing options. "We need to get past that roadblock and reach a populated area where Blackwood can't risk direct action, or find a way to contact the authorities directly with what we know." "My contact at UGA," Eleanor suggested. "Dr. Myers. If we can reach him, he could notify the proper authorities, validate the evidence we have." "How far are we from the university?" Michael asked. "Athens is about 80 miles from here," Eleanor calculated. "But we'd need transportation." William was scanning the highway, his experienced eyes picking out details the others might miss. "Small motel about half-mile south of the roadblock. Likely to have vehicles we could borrow." "Steal," Michael translated bluntly. "Temporarily requisition," William corrected with grim humor. "Under extraordinary circumstances." They remained in concealment, observing the roadblock and surrounding area for nearly 20 minutes. State patrol officers were stopping and checking vehicles, apparently looking for specific descriptions. "They haven't deployed search teams into the forest yet," William noted. "They're focusing on the roads. That gives us an advantage." Moving with careful stealth, they paralleled the highway through the forest edge until the small motel William had spotted came into view. A dozen vehicles were parked in the lot, mostly pickup trucks and modest sedans. "We need something inconspicuous but reliable," Michael assessed. "And we need dry clothes. We can't travel looking like this." "Motel will have laundry facilities," Eleanor suggested. "Might be able to find something." William nodded approval. "Good thinking. I'll check the vehicles. Michael, see what you can find for clothing. Eleanor, stay with Atlas in the tree line. Less conspicuous than a soaking wet woman with a German Shepherd." Michael approached the motel cautiously. The property was quiet at this early hour, most guests still sleeping. A small laundry room attached to the main building proved to be unoccupied and unlocked. Inside, several dryers contained abandoned or forgotten clothing, left by travelers who had departed without collecting their laundry. He selected items that might roughly fit each of them: jeans, t-shirts, a flannel shirt for William, a sweater for Eleanor, not perfect but better than their wet, muddy clothes. A stack of clean towels provided an additional bonus. Meanwhile, William was examining the parked vehicles, looking for one both suitable and accessible. He settled on an older model Subaru Outback with Georgia plates, all-wheel drive for potentially rough terrain, common enough to avoid attention, old enough to potentially lack sophisticated anti-theft systems. They regrouped at the forest edge, Michael distributing the salvaged clothing. They changed quickly, the dry garments providing immediate relief despite the imperfect fit. Atlas received a thorough toweling, the German Shepherd tolerating the attention with patient dignity. "Found our transportation," William reported, indicating the Subaru. "Older model, should be straightforward to start without keys, but we need to move quickly. Hotel staff will be up soon." "What about the roadblock?" Eleanor asked, now dressed in jeans and an oversized UGA sweatshirt. "We'll avoid it," William replied. "There's a service road behind the motel that connects to County Road 115, longer route to Athens but bypasses the roadblock." They approached the Subaru cautiously, Atlas remaining close to Michael. William worked quickly on the door lock, then the ignition, his skills apparently undiminished by years of civilian life. The engine started quietly, and they piled in, William driving, Michael in the passenger seat, Eleanor and Atlas in the back. "Stay low until we're clear of the area," William instructed as they pulled out of the motel parking lot. "We're not in the clear yet." He navigated back roads with confident precision, avoiding the main highway and its roadblocks. As dawn broke over the Georgia mountains, they were traveling south on rural routes toward Athens and the University of Georgia and hopefully safety. But safety, as they would soon discover, was still far from guaranteed. The University of Georgia campus was awakening to an ordinary Tuesday morning when the borrowed Subaru pulled into a secluded corner of the veterinary medicine parking lot. William cut the engine, his experienced eyes scanning for security cameras or campus police. "Dr. Myers should be in his office by now," Eleanor said, checking her watch. It was just past 8 a.m., less than an hour before the evidence was scheduled to be delivered to the Congressional Committee in Washington. "His research lab is in the Veterinary Medical Center, northwest corner." Michael studied Atlas, who despite the night's ordeal remained alert and composed. The German Shepherd's remarkable resilience continued to impress him. Where most dogs would be exhausted and stressed after such experiences, Atlas maintained his disciplined vigilance. "We can't all go," Michael decided. "Too conspicuous. Eleanor, you take the evidence and make contact with Dr. Myers. He knows you professionally. He'll be more likely to take this seriously coming from you." Eleanor nodded, accepting the waterproof bag containing the Project Shepherd's legacy documentation. "What about you three?" "We'll secure a different vehicle and meet you at the rendezvous point we discussed," William replied. 1 hour. If anyone doesn't show, proceed to the backup location." Michael knelt beside Atlas, speaking quietly. "Go with Eleanor. Protect." He used the command tone they had practiced during their weeks together. Atlas looked from Michael to Eleanor, then back again, showing an understanding that went beyond normal canine comprehension. There was hesitation in his posture, reluctance to separate from Michael after all they had been through together. "It's okay," Michael reassured him, gently touching the dog's head. "I'll see you soon." With apparent deliberation, Atlas moved to Eleanor's side, positioning himself in the protective stance of a trained working dog. Eleanor shouldered the evidence bag and gave Michael one last, concerned look. "Be careful," she said simply. "You too." They watched as Eleanor and Atlas made their way across the parking lot toward the Veterinary Medical Center, the German Shepherd maintaining perfect heel position despite never having been formally trained with Eleanor as handler. Another testament to his extraordinary intelligence and adaptability. "She'll be safer with him than with us," William observed as they disappeared into the building. "Atlas has better instincts than most humans I've known." Michael nodded agreement, though the separation created a surprising hollowness in his chest. In just a few weeks, Atlas had become more than a rescued animal to him. They had formed a bond forged through shared trauma and gradual healing. William was already moving, leading them toward a different section of campus where student parking provided more anonymity and options. "We need another vehicle." "The Subaru may have been reported stolen by now." They located an older model Toyota Camry with a faculty parking sticker, less likely to be missed immediately than a student's car. William made quick work of the locks and ignition, his expression unapologetic when he caught Michael's raised eyebrow. "Extraordinary circumstances," he reminded his son, starting the engine. "We'll return it when this is over." They drove to the predetermined rendezvous point, a small coffee shop in downtown Athens, positioned where they could observe approaches from multiple directions. As they waited, Michael found himself repeatedly checking his watch and scanning the street for Eleanor and Atlas. "They'll make it," William said, reading his concern. "Dr. Myers is well respected in veterinary forensics. Once he understands what they've documented, he'll contact the proper authorities." "Assuming Blackwood hasn't already intercepted them," Michael replied grimly. "He has resources we can't match and connections in multiple agencies." William's expression hardened, "which is precisely why I made sure the evidence would be delivered to the Congressional Committee through multiple channels. Even if he intercepts one copy, others will reach their destination." Before Michael could respond, his burner phone vibrated, a text from Eleanor's number. "Change of plans. Meet at loading dock behind VMC. Urgent." He showed William the message, a sense of unease growing. "Could be a trap. Could be legitimate," William countered. "Only one way to find out." He paused, studying his son. "But we go in carefully. Remember your training." The Veterinary Medical Center's loading dock was deserted when they arrived. No staff, no deliveries, no sign of Eleanor or Atlas. Michael's combat instincts immediately registered the wrongness of the situation. "Something's off," he murmured, scanning the area from the car. "Where is everyone?" "A facility this size should have regular deliveries, staff movement." William nodded agreement, his own military experience informing the same assessment. "We don't approach directly. Circle around. Find another entry point." They abandoned the Toyota a block away, approaching the Veterinary Medical Center on foot through a landscaped area that provided partial cover. A service door near the loading dock showed signs of recent forced entry, subtle but visible to trained eyes. "Definitely not good," William observed quietly. They entered cautiously, finding themselves in a service corridor. The facility seemed unnaturally quiet for a weekday morning in an active veterinary teaching hospital. No staff, no students, no background noise of a functioning medical center. "Evacuation," Michael concluded in a whisper. "Someone cleared the building." William nodded grimly. "Which means we're walking into whatever caused that evacuation." They moved deeper into the facility, following signs toward the research laboratories where Dr. Myers would be located. As they approached the northwest corner, voices became audible. Tense, urgent conversation from behind a set of double doors marked "Veterinary Forensics." Michael and William positioned themselves on either side of the doors, listening intently. "Need you to verify these findings immediately, Doctor." The voice was unmistakably Richard Blackwood's, commanding, accustomed to obedience. "Confirm that these injuries are consistent with standard military working dog training protocols." Another voice, presumably Dr. Myers, responded with professional firmness. "These are not standard training injuries, Mr. Blackwood. The pattern and severity indicate systematic application of pain response conditioning far beyond any acceptable training methodology. In my professional opinion, this constitutes criminal animal abuse." "Your opinion is irrelevant, Doctor. Sign the statement confirming these are within normal parameters for military working dogs." "I will not falsify my professional assessment," Myers responded, his voice steady despite the clear threat underlying Blackwood's demand. "Then perhaps your colleague will be more cooperative." Eleanor's voice joined the conversation, tight with controlled fear, but unbroken. "Dr. Myers is right. The documentation speaks for itself. Project Shepherd's legacy crossed every ethical boundary in animal treatment. No legitimate veterinarian would certify these methods as acceptable." "Where's the dog?" Michael whispered to William, noting Atlas's conspicuous absence from the conversation. William shook his head, indicating uncertainty, then pointed to himself. "Then the doors. He would create a diversion." Michael nodded, understanding, positioning himself for entry. William took a deep breath, then shoved the doors open, stepping into the laboratory with confident authority. "Richard Blackwood," he announced loudly. "Military Intelligence Oversight Committee. This facility is now under federal jurisdiction." The momentary confusion created by William's entrance gave Michael the opportunity to slip in behind him, quickly assessing the situation. Blackwood stood near a laboratory counter, flanked by two men Michael recognized from the previous night's pursuit. Dr. Myers, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, was seated at a desk, Eleanor beside him, both under obvious duress. A laptop displayed what appeared to be medical images, Atlas's injury documentation. Most crucially, Michael noted Atlas himself was not in the room. Blackwood recovered quickly from his surprise. "William Harrison," he said, recognition dawning. "Should have known you'd be involved in this." "Still trying to undermine critical national security programs, I see." "Criminal enterprises disguised as national security," William corrected coldly. "Your Project Shepherd's legacy was shut down for ethical violations, Blackwood. Continuing it privately doesn't make it legal or moral." Michael used the exchange to make eye contact with Eleanor, who subtly indicated a door at the rear of the laboratory with a slight head movement. Atlas, he surmised, was being held elsewhere. The program was developing capabilities crucial to counter-terrorism operations, Blackwood insisted. Imagine detection dogs that could identify not just explosives, but the intent to use them. Canines that could recognize deception, hostility, psychopathic tendencies before they manifested in action. "At what cost?" Dr. Myers interjected, professional outrage overcoming caution. "The neurological conditioning documented here would cause extreme suffering. You weren't just training these animals, you were fundamentally altering their brain function through trauma." "Necessary sacrifices," Blackwood dismissed. "SL7, Atlas, as you've sentimentally named him, was our most successful subject. His ability to detect micro-expressions indicating deception is beyond anything we've achieved previously." "He's not a subject," Michael said, breaking his silence. "He's a living being who you tortured in the name of national security." Blackwood turned to Michael, his expression hardening. "You have no concept of the threats this country faces, Harrison. Your father's sanctimonious oversight committee shut down programs that could have prevented attacks, saved American lives, all because they couldn't stomach the methods required." "Methods that violated every standard of humane treatment," Eleanor countered. "Dr. Myers has already documented enough to bring criminal charges against you personally, Blackwood." "It's over." A cold smile touched Blackwood's lips. "I don't think so. My men are currently retrieving SL7 from your improvised holding area, Dr. Sullivan. Once we have the dog and this documentation, there will be no evidence of any wrongdoing." "Except for the copies already delivered to the Congressional Committee," William interjected, checking his watch pointedly. "As of 20 minutes ago, Project Shepherd's legacy is being reviewed by people even your connections can't silence." Uncertainty flickered across Blackwood's face for the first time, a micro-expression that Michael recognized from his own military training. The man was assessing whether William was bluffing. "You're lying," Blackwood decided, though his confidence seemed slightly diminished. "There's been no leak to any committee." 9 o'clock a.m. delivery to Congresswoman Hernandez, Senator Wilkins, and the Justice Department's Special Investigations Unit, Williams stated with precise detail. Digital and physical copies with authenticated chain of custody documentation. Even if you leave here with Atlas and all the evidence in this room, it won't matter. The investigation is already in motion. The laboratory doors burst open again, one of Blackwood's operatives returning, alone and agitated. "Sir, the dog is gone. Holding room was empty. Rear door forced open from the inside." Michael couldn't suppress a small smile. Atlas had escaped his captors, likely using the same intelligence and training that Blackwood had forced upon him. "Find him," Blackwood ordered sharply. "He can't have gone far." But the momentary distraction provided the opportunity William had been waiting for. With the reflexes of a much younger man, he lunged forward, disarming the nearest operative with a precise strike to the wrist. Michael moved simultaneously, tackling the second man before he could draw his weapon. The laboratory erupted into chaos, equipment crashing, glass breaking as the struggle expanded across the room. Dr. Myers pulled Eleanor beneath a sturdy lab table, both taking cover from the violent confrontation. Michael found himself facing Blackwood directly, the older man surprisingly capable in hand-to-hand combat despite his administrative position. Military training, Michael realized, not just oversight, but operational experience. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," Blackwood growled as they grappled. "SL-7 is worth more than you can imagine. The capabilities we developed—" "His name is Atlas," Michael interrupted, blocking a strike to his midsection. "And he's not your property anymore." Across the room, William had subdued one operative and was engaging the second, his movements efficient despite his age. The discipline of daily exercise and maintained skills evident in his performance. The laboratory door crashed open once more and Michael braced for additional opponents, but instead, a familiar form charged into the room. Atlas, moving with the precision of his military training, assessed the situation in seconds and acted decisively. The German Shepherd targeted Blackwood specifically, not with a full attack, but a tactical intervention, clamping onto the man's arm with controlled pressure, forcing him away from Michael. The precision was remarkable, enough force to immobilize but not maim, exactly the restraint technique used on the intruder in Michael's home days earlier. "Atlas!" Michael called out in relief. Blackwood, his arm trapped in Atlas's powerful jaws, stared at the dog with a mixture of pain, fury, and, most surprisingly, vindication. "You see," he gasped. "Perfect execution. Threat assessment, appropriate force application, target discrimination, everything we trained him for." "No," Michael countered, moving to Atlas's side. "This isn't your conditioning. This is his choice. He's protecting people he cares about, not responding to programmed commands." Campus security finally arrived, accompanied by local police alerted by the evacuation alarm. The scene they encountered must have been bewildering. A destroyed laboratory, an elderly professor and female veterinarian emerging from under a table, two men subdued on the floor, another held at bay by a German Shepherd, and William and Michael Harrison standing amid the chaos. These men broke in and threatened staff at gunpoint. Dr. Myers announced immediately, his professional authority carrying weight. They were attempting to steal research documentation and force us to sign false statements. The ensuing police response was methodical. Weapons secured, individuals separated, statements taken. Blackwood attempted to invoke national security protocols, but the local officers, unimpressed, simply added his claims to their report while continuing standard arrest procedures. As Blackwood was being handcuffed, he fixed Michael with a cold stare. "This isn't over, Harrison. I have connections you can't imagine. By tomorrow, I'll be released, and none of this will matter." "Perhaps," William interjected, approaching with his phone displayed. "But by tomorrow, these congressional hearings will be public record. Your connections are already distancing themselves, Richard. No one wants to be associated with documented animal cruelty for a program that was officially terminated years ago. For the first time, genuine uncertainty showed on Blackwood's face as he was led away. In the aftermath, as police secured the scene and collected evidence, Michael knelt beside Atlas, checking the German Shepherd for any injuries. The dog appeared unharmed, his intelligent eyes fixed on Michael's face with what could only be described as relief. "You came back for us," Michael said softly, allowing himself to fully embrace Atlas for the first time. The dog pressed against him, no longer hesitant in his physical contact. "You escaped and came back." Eleanor joined them, her composure returning now that the immediate danger had passed. "When they separated us, they put Atlas in an examination room with a standard kennel. What they didn't realize is that he's smart enough to operate a simple latch system." She shook her head in amazement. "He didn't just escape. He deliberately circled back into the building rather than running to safety. He came looking for us." Dr. Myers approached, regarding Atlas with professional interest. "Extraordinary animal," he observed. "I've reviewed the documentation of his injuries and the training methods used. The neurological conditioning he was subjected to was beyond anything I've encountered in 30 years of veterinary forensics." "Can it be reversed?" Michael asked, the question that had been haunting him since discovering Atlas's history. The veterinarian considered this carefully. "Not reversed, precisely. The neural pathways created through that conditioning are permanent, but new pathways can be formed, healthy ones based on positive experiences." He nodded toward the bond evident between Michael and Atlas, "which appears to be already happening. He's choosing connection over conditioning. That's remarkable, given what he endured." William joined them, having completed his statement to the police. "Congressional committee has received the evidence," he confirmed. "Senator Wilkins just called. They're convening an emergency hearing this afternoon. Blackwood's connections are scrambling to distance themselves." "So it's over?" Eleanor asked, hopefully. "This phase," William clarified. "There will be investigations, hearings, possibly criminal charges. The full extent of Project Shepherd's legacy will be exposed." He looked at Atlas with newfound respect. "And this remarkable dog will be the living evidence of both its ethical failures and the resilience of the animals it exploited." As the immediate crisis subsided, reality began to reassert itself. The stolen vehicles would need to be returned, statements formalized, futures considered. But for the moment, in the quiet corner of the damaged laboratory, Michael simply sat with Atlas, the German Shepherd leaning against him with complete trust, a trust that had been earned through consistent care rather than enforced through conditioning. "What happens now?" Eleanor asked quietly, the question encompassing more than just the immediate aftermath. Michael looked from Atlas to his father, then back to Eleanor. "Now," he said with quiet certainty, "we go home." But home, he realized, was no longer just a place. It was wherever this improbable family they had formed chose to be together. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Michael stood on the porch of his rebuilt mountain cabin, watching Atlas patrol the perimeter with his characteristic methodical precision. The German Shepherd moved with confidence through the fallen leaves, his coat glossy and full, the physical scars of his past now hidden beneath healthy fur. The congressional hearings had concluded with decisive action. Project Shepherd's legacy officially condemned, criminal charges filed against Richard Blackwood and several associates, and new legislation proposed to strengthen oversight of military working dog programs. Atlas had been formally recognized as evidence in the case, his ownership legally transferred to Michael, with special provisions acknowledging his unique training and abilities. William Harrison had emerged from retirement to consult on the investigation. his decades of intelligence oversight experience proving invaluable. The tentative reconnection between father and son had strengthened through their shared purpose, old wounds gradually healing through unspoken understanding and newfound respect. Eleanor Sullivan had returned to her veterinary practice, but remained a frequent visitor to the mountain cabin, her professional expertise and personal warmth becoming integral to both Michael and Atlas's ongoing recovery. The connection that had formed between them during their ordeal had evolved into something neither had anticipated, but both treasured. And Atlas, remarkable, resilient Atlas, continued to reclaim his own nature from the conditioning that had been forced upon him. He still carried the extraordinary abilities Blackwood's program had cultivated, but now used them on his own terms, his intelligence and perceptiveness directed toward protection rather than exploitation. As Michael watched the German Shepherd complete his morning patrol and bound up the porch steps to join him, he reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a rain-soaked roadside to congressional testimony, from mistrust to unshakable loyalty, from isolation to connection. Atlas pressed against Michael's leg, looking up with those intelligent brown eyes that had first captured his heart in the pouring rain. No longer tearful, no longer pleading, but clear and certain in their bond. "Good boy," Michael said softly, resting his hand on the dog's head. "We made it." And in that moment, standing together on the porch of a home built from the ashes of trauma and deception, both man and dog embodied the same profound truth, that even the deepest wounds could heal, that trust could be rebuilt from betrayal, and that the capacity for loyalty, the genuine, chosen loyalty of one being to another, remained perhaps the most powerful force of all. In a world where loyalty seems increasingly rare, Atlas's journey reminds us that second chances can appear when we least expect them. Like many of us who've weathered life's storms, this remarkable German Shepherd carried the scars of his past, yet found the courage to trust again. Michael's story mirrors what many of us understand deeply, that sometimes the most profound healing comes through helping another soul heal. Their bond speaks to something we all seek, connection that transcends words, that stands firm against life's hardest challenges. When Atlas chose to return instead of running to safety, he demonstrated what we've always known in our hearts, that true loyalty isn't programmed or conditioned, but freely given. In our golden years, isn't this the wisdom we've earned? That the deepest relationships often come after our greatest trials? That it's never too late to rebuild trust, reconnect with estranged family, or open our hearts to unexpected joy? What unexpected relationship has brought healing to your life? Have you ever found that in helping another soul heal, you discovered your own path to wholeness? Share your story below. We need to hear how you found connection when you needed it most.